Yo, what's good, Shinobi Nation? Welcome back to Just a Shinobi, the home of the craziest Naruto what-ifs. Today we're jumping into part 10, the final part of What If Naruto Says I Am Not Going to Puberty Again. So strap in, because things are about to get explosive. If you're new to the channel, make sure to smash that subscribe button, hit the bell so you don't miss the next chapter, and share this video with your whole ninja squad. And of course, drop your theories in the comments. Your support is what keeps this Shinobi grinding. Shit. We were not paid enough to handle this crap. Karenbana swore to herself as she ran through the dark, dimly lit palace halls. Every shadow she passed seemed to hide a potential foe, and the glow of crimson eyes haunted the corners of her mind. Her face was pale, her blouse ripped and torn to reveal thin, shallow cuts littering her torso, and a close-shorn scalp was conspicuously bare of its accustomed wig. Fear was a constant companion for Shinobi, both a blade to lay enemies low and a whetstone to make oneself ready. Fear was good, fear was useful. Fear keeps you on your toes. A good ninja knew how to work with fear, how to hone themselves into a keen edge and turn that acute awareness of the threat posed by their enemy into a desperate, resourceful cunning that would reverse the situation and carry them out alive. Maybe even victorious. But it was a double-edge that fear tempered, a perilous Muramasa that could slay you as easily as save you, and what Karenbana felt right now was no constructive inkling. This was not a reasonable awareness of danger, not a shot of adrenaline to sharpen her senses and heighten her awareness. This was dread, terror, unthinking and visceral. She was not, at this moment, a hunter looking into the eyes of a tiger and steeling herself in wit and strength. It was not something she could use, not a well of strength to empower her in the last resort. She was a seasoned mercenary, a rogue ninja with countless notches on her belt. Despite a petite build and childlike stature, she had fought and defeated scores of foes in her time. She was ruthless, she was cold-blooded, she was a dagger in the night that silenced lords and generals, an icy wind from hell's depths that quenched the feeble flames of resistance. She was Kunoichi, the reaper's side shrouded in a veil of silk, a pleasing form that disguised a walking instrument of death. Or so she would tell you, at least. It was admittedly difficult to unironically call yourself a seductive emissary of the cold beyond when you were built like a preteen boy, but then so often people most deeply long for and idealize those traits which they simply did not have. The weak want to be strong, the foolish want to be smart, the lonely want to be popular, and the homely want to be handsome. So on and so forth. But that aside, Karenbana was an experienced ninja who had undertaken 100 life-or-death missions and completed every one without fail. She was not a helpless craven who balked at the first sign of peril. She wasn't an undisciplined greenhorn who turned tail and ran the moment shit went south. Yet here she was, blindly running for her life from a foe she couldn't even be sure was actually actively pursuing her. Of course, to be fair, any ninja less than a kage or living legend who possessed the faintest degree of sense would only fight an opponent like Itachi Uchiha if there was absolutely no other option. There were loads of loonies and psychos in the world of rogue ninja, and all sorts of horror stories about the biggest and baddest bastards in the underworld, but even compared to the most feared and infamous criminals out there, a ninja wiping out their own clan was nothing to sneeze at. And when that clan was, by itself, a force that could nearly rival the military of a hidden village, with centuries of history and a fearsome bloodline that could be traced back to the earliest days of shinobi history, a clan that most considered to be the elite of the elite, renowned for producing masters and prodigies with such frightening regularity that pretty much anyone bearing their family's crest was automatically marked down as a potential serious threat. Well, the person who accomplished that would become the boogeyman's boogeyman. So, regardless of whatever whispered rumors may have been in circulation about this guy apparently being pardoned and accepted back into the forces of his home village, all Karenbana knew or cared to know was that Itachi Uchiha was one of the baddest dudes around, an S-class rating in the bingo book, and a perfect 10 on the scale of dashing rogues. Not that she, paid any particular attention to that last one. Nay, perish the thought. She was a consummate professional, and she would never let herself get distracted by a pretty face while on the job. In that respect, mortal terror was quite useful. Except for when it carried her straight into a trap. Oof. Shit. Seriously, Karenbana was so worried about Itachi taking her from behind that she didn't even notice the other Uchiha kid cutting her off until he had swept her legs out from under her and jabbed the pommel of a kunai into her gut. This knocked the wind out of her lungs real effectively. Hurt like a some bitch, too. But she still could have recovered and maybe put up a bit more of a fight, despite the pain and imbalance, if not for the hand that subsequently grasped her shoulder, and the hot breath that washed over the back of her neck. Her blood ran cold, and a leaden weight settled in her stomach. "Take care of her, will you?" said the 12-year-old who had just humiliated Caranbana, smirking and turning his back on her. "She's the only combatant left." "The others are dead?" came Itachi's voice from behind her, right in her ear, terrifying and a little thrilling in its sheer proximity. "No, but they probably wish they were." Sasuke then melted into the shadows, leaving Caranbana with her captor. She probably could have made a go at escaping, then, since the only restraint was a hand on her shoulder, but by this point she'd unconsciously regressed from bolting in terror to freezing up and hoping the problem would fix itself. For a moment there was only awkward, smothering silence. It was a long moment, enough for her adrenaline to fade and leave behind a sore, tired, sweaty wreck of a woman. Weakly, Caranbana assessed her chances. She found them to be distressingly poor. "Fuck, my employer is dead, isn't he?" This was more a statement than a real question. It was, at most, a rhetorical inquiry meant to serve as a bleak observation of her circumstances, not something she posed in expectation of an answer. But this fact didn't stop Itachi from responding. "He will be shortly, if he isn't already." She felt him squeeze her shoulder. In another context, she would have assumed this to be an attempt at a comforting gesture, but here? From a killer as infamous as Itachi Uchiha? It couldn't possibly be that. "I see. And what do you plan to do with me?" she grimly wondered. Considering this guy's reputation, she'd be lucky if she just found herself stripped, beaten, tossed in a ditch, and left to die. In that event, there could at least be a chance of surviving and finding her way home. The worst-case scenario wasn't something she dared even consider. "I could turn you over to the authorities," Itachi said. Caranbana immediately reconsidered what she thought would be the worst possible outcome. Considering that she and her teammates were kind of technically missing Nin well, she'd seen how her home village dealt with traitors. Flayed alive, drawn and quartered, burned at the stake, or even outright crucified. If she was hanged or beheaded, that would be a reasonably positive outcome, because at least then her death would be relatively quick and painless. And civilian magistrates would scarcely be kinder, considering that she had just fought on the losing side of a coup d'état. Even if the prince didn't make an example of her alongside her teammates, she'd probably be imprisoned and left at the mercy of his loyal soldiers. A shudder of dread and disgust went up her spine at this thought. "What if I asked you to just kill me now?" she asked bleakly. "I would not," he said. "You were simply doing the job you were paid to do. If you are put to death, then let it be only after you have been given due process and tried in accordance with the laws of the land." Caranbana turned her head to stare at Itachi, blinking owlishly. "Wow, what world do you live in?" she wondered disbelievingly. "There's no way you can't be aware that they'll just send me to the gallows the moment you turn me over." "It will be out of my hands," he said. "I have no reason to either kill you personally or let you go." For a moment, Caranbana mulled over this statement, and inwardly debated the merits of one strategy over another. Against all odds, it seemed like this guy was actually bizarrely idealistic, or at least really good at lying to himself and pretending that the world was fair. At the very least, it looked like maybe he wasn't the murderous, cold-blooded psychopath all the stories made him out to be. Yes, maybe that would work. It was an option she usually scorned as undignified and pathetic, but beggars could hardly be choosers. If it could get her out of this alive, she would stoop to any level. And he was really cute for a teen. That would probably make it easier for her to swallow. Schooling her face into a seductive expression, Caranbana inched herself closer to Itachi and gave him a sample of sultry, heated bedroom eyes. Smiling coyly, she made a show of looking him up and down. So you say, but maybe I could make it worth your while to reconsider. Handsome?" She winked, swallowing her pride and desperately hoping this would work. "A beat." "Sorry, but I'm not interested in children," Itachi bluntly answered. There was a moment of silence. A pregnant pause. Then Caranbana snapped. Hato finished his obnoxious villain rant by flicking his wrist and flinging Temujin aside with an invisible force. The old man with the awesome hat cried out in protest, and Narugui lay motionless on the floor. Elsewhere, Kiba and Akamaru were fighting the wolf girl, while Shino battled the bat girl. Naruto stood with his arms crossed at the edge of the chamber, a stony expression on his face. Temujin stared at the man who had raised him, the man whom he had unquestioningly served for so many years. He was in shock, unable to move, scarcely even able to breathe. Tears shimmered in his eyes. It was all for power, Hato declared. And what a power it is! Yes, now that the source of all is within my grasp, I have no further use for you. Go, join the rest of your family in the hereafter. With a sneer, he raised his hand. The stone in the palm of Hato's glove blazed with a faint light, and Temujin saw his life flash before his eyes where a blast of energy swallowed his field of view. An explosion rocked the chamber, and brought loose stones tumbling from the ceiling. The smoke cleared, and Temujin was surprised to find himself unmarked. A sphere of black something floated between him and Hato, no larger than an orange, wreathed in wisps of smoke and bobbing a few feet above a respectable crater. It was level with Hato's hand, and lingering sparks dancing around it betrayed that this orb had just taken the blast meant for Temujin. Hato stared, perplexed. Temujin gaped, trying to figure out what had just happened. Naruto took a step forward, and his footfall was a deafening booming noise that echoed through the mine. His face was unreadable save for his eyes, which were a cold and steely blue. Some massive presence bore down on everyone in the room, and the hell overhead started to crack. The truth-seeking orb unraveled, and the stone in Hato's glove exploded into 100 glittering shards. Thank you for that, Naruto said to Hato, cracking his knuckles. Really, thank you? It's been a very long time since I've fought an enemy who was such a genuinely irredeemable piece of shit. But now I can go all out without feeling guilty. He clenched his fist, and his chakra flared to life like an explosion. Following the example of Hato's glove, the fell in the mines rang, quivered, trembled, and shattered in catastrophic resonance with an even greater power, showering the chamber in glittering stardust. Holy Mother of Breath, Temujin, staring awestruck as he crossed himself. What the? Hato gasped, his monocle popping out. You're a disgrace to good leaders everywhere, taking advantage of lost and misguided kids to further your own selfish ambitions, Naruto growled. You make people like Danzo and Orochimaru seem downright reasonable, because they at least talk about having goals larger than themselves. But you? No, you're just a selfish, greedy son of a bitch who wants power for power's sake, and will do anything it takes to get it. You make me sick. Naruto's eyes flashed, and he willed a Rasengan into life. It sucked in the airborne particles of gel, drawing down the fantastic energy in every mote of dust, swelling rapidly in size and gaining an otherworldly glow as it took on the nature of all things. The shards of hell drew into alignment around the makeshift chakra singularity, orbiting it like stars in the arms of a galaxy. Temujin scooped up Narugui and ran over to the old man behind Naruto, being in possession of sufficient sense to realize that he did not want to get in the blonde's way right now. Hato, resting squarely at the other end of the spectrum in regards to not being an idiot, dumbly stared at the cosmic Rasen shuriken and tried to wrap his head around the fact that the very power he had sought was now being focused into an attack aimed squarely at him. Well, what is this impudence? He shrieked in furious indignation, frothing and livid. How dare you? You have no right to this. After everything I've sacrificed to get here, damn you. Who do you think you are, boy? Naruto scoffed and looked Hato straight in the eye, holding a giant, galaxy-shaped Rasen shuriken that glowed with an emerald green energy. Who the hell do you think I am? He replied. Bounding forward in the blink of an eye, Naruto whipped the Giga Rasen shuriken at Hato. It caught him square in the gut and carried him off the floor, swerving upward at Naruto's command and piercing through the earth. This attack rose above the heavens, a buzzsaw of unbridled power lifting Hato into orbit. Idly, Naruto hoped it didn't hit the moon when it detonated. That would be really hard to explain. The graceful lioness pounced, and the mighty mother bear struck. Sakura rammed her fist through the chakra-absorbing crystal, smashing it into pieces, and Hinata jabbed digital fangs into the armor's bared inner workings, rapid finger strikes shutting down the flow of energy through it. Their opponent didn't even get a chance to react, and Doto's expression during this was priceless. First there was the moment of confusion, then the shock as he realized what had just happened, and finally the dawning look of fear. He saw them cock their arms back in unison, and take one menacing step forward. Like a hissing noise coming from a paper tag, he instinctively grasped the imminent danger betrayed by their stances. It was as obvious as a fist inches from your face. Oh, sure. Simultaneously, faster than lightning, the two girls struck him in the gut. Doto was launched straight through the air, catapulted backwards by their combined blow, and he crashed with a massive boom into one of the iced-over pylons, where a thick frost covering shattered from the force of his body's impact. Miraculously, the devices activated, and the reveal of their true nature was a very beautiful and striking scene with all the packed snow, glacial ice, and permafrost quickly vanishing to expose a perfectly green and vibrant meadow, rather than a filthy, slushy, muddy hellhole of a mess. There was a moment of respectful silence for the death of the generic villain, while those present stared in awe and wonder at the compelling, provocative imagery of. Wow, Hinata said, looking at the melting snow and ice. This can't be good for the environment. It really isn't, Sakura said. Just think of all the flash floods from melted snow, or what the warmer temperatures here will do to the continent's weather systems. I mean, thank goodness it's only temporary, but still. Koyuki-san's father really wasn't a very prudent ruler, was he? Hinata whispered, looking sidelong at the princess in question. Spending a fortune on developing weapons, or just stashing away a huge cache of treasure, probably would have been a better investment for his country. I know, right? Sakura said with a grimace. Talk about horrifically short-sighted. Koyuki chose this moment to frown and glance in the girl's direction, her eyes narrowing suspiciously. Hinata and Sakura immediately looked the other way and started innocently whistling. Koyuki pursed her lips and sniffed. And then, after we tied up all the loose ends and attended her inauguration, I handed Koyuki-san a list of suggestions for her next movie. Hinata set down her cup of tea and gestured vaguely, a sweet smile hardly belying the implications of her statement. Naruto nodded and Sasuke hummed. Sakura sniggered and waggled her eyebrows suggestively. You forgot to mention the kisses she gave us as thanks, the pinkette quipped, elbowing Hinata in the ribs. That was an especially nice bonus. Naruto whistled and Sasuke stared. She kissed you? They said, one sounding interested while the other sounded disbelieving. Yeah, Sakura said. Now I know what it feels like to be the Prince Charming in a fairy tale. He slows better than being the princess. I don't know. I still think I'd rather wait in the tower than fight the dragon, Hinata said with a laugh. And there's something to be said about seeing the man of your dreams climb atop his vanquished foe, his clothes tattered from an epic battle, his skin glistening from sweat and smeared with blood, his muscles bulging as he wraps you up in his arms and red heart. Naruto grinned rakishly while Sasuke rolled his eyes. Sakura chortled. Yes. But enough about us. How'd your mission go, dear? She asked Sasuke. He shrugged. It was a success, he said. We protected the prince and his convoy, and I assassinated a would-be usurper. Also, Itachi might have started some kind of relationship with an enemy kunoichi, I'm not completely certain. What a heartbreaker, Naruto deadpanned. Did he get any of her numbers? We're pre-telephones, idiot. Or did you forget? No, I mean Naruto waved a hand and traced an hourglass in the air. You know, her numbers. Vitals. Measurements. Height, weight, birthday, hair color, eye color, blood type, sign lower, conspiratorially, he added, bust, waist, hips. You know, that kind of thing. Sasuke snorted. What does it matter? He asked. It's for research, Naruto said. I've been cataloging all known Uchiha and their love interests to see if there are any features in common. We need inspiration, pal. Why don't you just do like Jiraiya and peep on women in the hot springs? It's less annoying that way, Sasuke retorted. Then he paused, looking perturbed. Oh wow. Can't believe I just said that. Neither can I, Naruto said. You know that's Hinata's job. The Hyuga clan already knows what everyone looks like naked. Sakura chuckled, and Hinata smiled slyly. Coughing and faintly blushing, Sasuke shifted in his seat. Gee, thanks for the reminder, he sarcastically muttered. But you'd have to ask Itachi for the details. He was reticent and didn't say much. You know, the way gentlemen are. He gave the others a pointed look. Wait, was it that girl who looked like a kid? Sakura interjected, frowning thoughtfully. I didn't know Itachi was into that. Looks like I'll have to watch out that I don't inflame his lusts, dear? Naruto laughed, and Hinata giggled at the joke, while Sasuke rolled his eyes. She was petite. Let's leave it at that, alright? He said. I'm having a hard enough time getting the image out of my head without you guys constantly prompting me for details. I saw things that I had no desire to ever see. Oh. His Rinnegan was on the whole time, wasn't it? Said Hinata, expression turning a touch sympathetic. Damn that shared field of vision, Sasuke grumbled, answer enough for the discussion's purpose. Hinata nodded softly in understanding. I understand. If it's any consolation, in my own family it's nearly an unspoken rite of passage to accidentally see family members in the middle of intimate discussions, she told him. Some things can never be unseen, so we just have to live with the mental images. She patted him comfortingly on the shoulder, sending a meaningful look to her husband. Right, Naruto said, catching her cue to change the topic. Well, as far as my own mission, I think it went pretty well. Shino and Kiba did great against their opponents. Relatedly, Shino is pants-shittingly terrifying. He shuddered theatrically. You don't really appreciate just how many orifices the average human body has until you've seen swarms of flesh-eating beetles pouring out of every single one. If Kurama hadn't been there to take my mind off of the absolute, unrelenting horror of the spectacle, I'd probably be a wordlessly gibbering wreck right about now. He raised his hands in a shrug and grinned, ending this observation on a morbidly joking note. Sasuke and Sakura snorted. What, you aren't already? The former said dryly. Meh. I've seen creepier, said Sakura at the same time, seeming nonchalant. What, seriously? The others all gave her skeptical looks. Pro tip? Never look at Shizen-san's internet history. A haunted smile adorned Sakura's lips, and her eyes were hollow shadows. You will be scarred for life. I am not even joking. Naruto scratched his chin thoughtfully. That explains so much, and yet so little. Our life stories in a nutshell. Makeshift laboratory. Timeline Gamma. The future. Adjusting coordinates to 00.914 along the delta blue axis. Prepared to fire tracer. Tracer charged. Particle density is optimal. Holding fire. Chrome plating gleamed on an object best described as an blooming sphere, glowing pulses of energy traveling along the dark ley lines of an obscenely complex seal formula etched into the metal. Minuscule, crystalline wafers no wider than the finest hairs leaned infinitesimally this way and that as hands alight with chakra molded a holographic input. Smaller than a grapefruit, this device looked like something straight out of science fiction, and its presence seemed to dominate the room in a subtle, almost indescribable way. Off to one side, Boruto Uzumaki flipped a switch on a far cruder-looking device, a mess of wires and circuits that seemed to have been soldered together in a mad rush. An LCD monitor flickered briefly, before flashing a string of numbers and formulaic symbols that would have looked like complete gibberish to 99% of humanity. Humming, the blonde tapped out a staccato beat on a nearby keyboard. A huddle of PCs jury-rigged into a cyclopean behemoth of processing power hummed and whirred, radiating significant amounts of heat noticeable even with the air conditioners clinking and roaring in every window, blasting cold air into the room. Detecting feedback echoes. Local receivers primed for temporal influx. Surge protectors in order. Understood, said Sarada Uchiha. Firing tracer. The device on the center table brightened slightly, then dimmed. It was strangely serene and understated, little more than a noiseless blip amidst the cacophonous buzzing and thrumming of the surrounding instruments. Sarada's glasses seemed opaque in the machine's glow, reflecting the light from its acid-etched circuitry. A moment later, her eyes were visible. They were baggy and a tad bloodshot, but her expression was still one of utmost concentration and alertness. 3 Sharingan stared unblinkingly into space, as though hoping to read the secrets of reality swirling in the nebulous ether. A bank of monitors lining one wall flashed various readings and calculations, displaying a flood of raw data that had started coming in before the tracer, a subatomic probe made of clustered elementary particles first observed, documented, and named by her boyfriend, was even fired. This was one of those small details that really drove home the surreality of their present work. Do we see any causal deviations in Delta Blue 00.914? She queried in a dry, clipped tone. Nothing significant, Boruto replied, clicking his tongue. Spacetime at those coordinates appears to react normally to tachyon scattering. It's a classic four-dimensional ripple pattern with zero hints of turbulence. I see. And you're cataloging the results anyways, I assume? I wouldn't be much of a scientist if I didn't. Not that you are a scientist in any official capacity. Science ninja, scientist, Boruto said. They're basically the same thing. That's not what Shiho-san says. Bah, what does she know? Cryptanalysis is just a glorified number game. No experiments, no discovery, nothing genuinely new. Just making more complicated patterns from the same basic elements. Sarada laughed. That sounds like all science in a nutshell, to me. But then I'd much rather be out in the field, on a mission, than doing any of these things. Boruto looked like a cross between peevish and sheepish. Philistines, he grumbled. I'm totally unappreciated in my time. To be fair, Uzumakian is kind of a silly name for a subatomic particle. I discovered them, Boruto said defensively. I should get to name them. And it's not like the name's irrelevant, anyways. Yeah, you discovered them while studying the properties of Aunt Karen's sealing chains. We all know the story, Mr. Raijin Bolt. Boruto blushed. That was just a phase, he mumbled. It's sewn onto the inside of your forehead protector. He went quiet, face beet red. For several moments he said nothing while his girlfriend's smirk grew steadily wider. Then he cleared his throat and flipped another switch, typing a command into their makeshift supercomputer. Adjusting coordinates to 00.915 along the Delta Blue axis, he said after a minute of awkward silence. Prepare to fire the tracer, okay? Got it, Sarada said, still smiling. Channeling a bit of chakra through the holographic input on the very fancy and expensive-looking instrument in the center of the room, she said, tracer charged. Particle density is optimal. Holding fire. Feedback from the next shot is starting to come in, Bolt said, regaining more of his professionalism as they resumed the zen tedium of experimentation. Back UPS stored, receivers primed. Surge protectors in order. Understood. Sarada nodded. Firing tracer. Once more, the device infinitesimally brightened for a second or two before returning to its standard luminescence. Data scrawled across the monitors. Anything here? Sarada asked. Tracer impact reveals slight causal turbulence in sector Delta Blue 00.915, marking these coordinates as a possible location. Oh. How many of those do we have so far? Somewhere in the range of 392,000, last I checked. Sarada hissed. Fuck. This is going to take us forever. On the bright side, I think I've almost perfected unifying field theory, Boruto said offhandedly with a lopsided smile. Mapping the geometry of spacetime in the infinite multiverse really gives you some excellent perspective on the fundamental nature of reality. Sarada gave a wry grin at this. Heh, I love it when you talk nerdy to me, she joked. Boruto laughed. Nobody takes us seriously. Naruto squinted at the ceiling, discontent, his brow furrowed in frustration. Sasuke frowned and followed his gaze. He saw buzzing fluorescent lights and sterile white tiles, plaster specked and mottled with minute lumps and depressions. Squinting irritably at this reminder of their present location, he glared at the strap on his wrist and the connected four. They were in the hospital, in a private room inaccessible to all but a select few. Most staff didn't even know about this hidden wing reserved chiefly for ANBU injured on top-secret missions, high-ranking members of command, and the Hokage. There was no outside documentation of the secret wing or its patients. All copies of the hospital's blueprints were censored to remove it, even the ones in the Konoha archives. Only 4 medics in the entire village even had the security clearance to actually work in here. Tsunade, Shizen, Sakura, and Natsuki, and Sakura was effectively out of commission for the foreseeable future. Not that Sasuke or Naruto knew any of this. They just knew that they were in the hospital for today, getting subjected to test after test after test because of reasons. Monitors and strange, futuristic-looking devices beeped and whined as they carried out their inscrutable functions, a caboodle of tubes and wires fastened to their bodies like strings on puppets. It was uncomfortable on multiple levels. Sasuke, for his part, absolutely hated every step of the experience. His strongest memory related to the smells and sights of a hospital room was waking up in one, tired and alone, lost and bereft after the events of a certain tragic night. Being forced to lie in a bed like this, hooked up to a dozen different machines and poked and prodded like a science experiment reminded him all too much of the shock, the numbness, the helplessness, and the hollow gaping wound of a sensation that was having his entire world destroyed and everyone he had ever known or loved torn away from him before he could even say goodbye. Before he could even understand what was happening. Sasuke grimaced. He could manage nothing else. "We're just a curiosity to them," he bitterly muttered. "An inconvenience, even. The people they really care about are the ones we replaced. We're just kids, a bad job for them to trudge through." Naruto stared at Sasuke. "Wow, you're depressing. The hell does Sakura-chan even see in you?" "I ask myself the same question every day," Sasuke said with a shrug. "And you're the one who started this discussion, Naruto. I'm just carrying on with the natural discourse." "But I didn't mean anything like what you said," Naruto protested. "You're just being a gloomy jerk, you dumb gloomy jerk." "Right," Sasuke drawled. "Because genuinely insightful observations are so far beyond your mental capacity." Blink. Did you just insult me?" "Yes," Sasuke deadpanned. "Yes, I did." Jerk. Scathing. A lull ensued in the conversation. The pair sat there on their respective hospital beds, giving each other dirty looks as the medical science machine things continued to beep and boop in that technical way things do. Naruto irritably fussed with the bandages on his right arm while Sasuke rolled his eyes and looked over at the door. He hummed quietly, wondering whether there might be anyone waiting outside. And while he didn't see any shadows in the space under the door, thinking about this did get him to recall the other two, and ponder where they might be. They hadn't seen the girls in a couple hours, since their minders had sneaked them here for another periodic checkup. Feeling the air against his bare back, Sasuke took a moment to express silent gratitude to whoever was looking out for him up there that Miss Shizen had at least not instructed them to remove their underwear as well. Still, it was a tiny bit embarrassing, he registered in the remote corner of his mind that still considered the cares and tendencies of a normal preteen boy, to be wearing this damned hospital gown. In a way, he supposed it was a good thing the girls were in a separate room. Hinata seemed uninterested in him, at least, but there was no telling how Sakura might act if she was in here with him. Considering how forward some of his other fangirls had acted at times, although she did seem to have grown much more down-to-earth over the course of their time here. Unbidden, Sasuke mused that the girls were probably wearing hospital gowns as well. Some animal part of his hindbrain reflexively pondered for a fleeting instant what kind of underwear they might be wearing, and while he quickly dispelled any musings on the view Hinata might present, the related thoughts of Sakura were significantly more difficult to expunge. Finally he broke the silence, even if only to divert himself. "Where do you suppose they're keeping Sakura and Hinata?" he wondered. "You know. The next room over?" said Naruto distractedly. "Why'd you ask?" Sasuke simply shrugged and said nothing. A slight dusting of red was visible on his cheeks. Naruto saw this, and he stared perplexedly. Musty, rusty, cobwebbed wheels and cogs slowly started to squeak and turn inside his head. With a thoughtful frown, he narrowed his eyes and scratched his chin. "Wait, you don't have a thing for Hinata, do you?" he asked in a suspicious tone. His mouth twitched, lips moving to expose his teeth in something that was decidedly not a smile. A gleam of something slightly irrational entered his eyes. Sasuke gave Naruto a frankly bewildered look. "Huh," he said. "Why on earth would you?" As abruptly as Naruto asked the question, the blonde then laughed and shook his head. His expression softened immediately. "No, never mind," he said, chuckling amusedly to himself. "That's crazy talk. You're not even interested in girls." Sasuke bristled. "And what gives you that impression, Naruto? What exactly are you implying?" Then I'm not turning my back on you so long as I'm wearing this hospital gown, for one thing, Naruto whispered. And seriously, do you even have to ask? I've never seen you give a girl the time of day. Like ever. Only because they've all acted like mindless, squealing fangirls, Sasuke said. Maybe if I met someone with a modicum of restraint and self-respect, I might be interested. He stared into the middle distance, saying this, a light blush marginally darkening. Naruto cocked an eyebrow and watched him suspiciously. You look like you already have someone in mind, the blonde commented, displaying an uncharacteristic level of romantic insight. Sasuke did a double take. But wah, he sputtered. And no, what are you talking about? Naruto scratched his chin, narrowing his eyes in a piercing glance. With a thoughtful expression steadily turning smug, a hint of comprehension kindled behind those vulpine slits. A shit-eating grin spread across his lips, making the Uchiha grimace, and Naruto sagely nodded. Oh, so that's how it is, he said. What's what? Sasuke demanded, sounding a touch defensive. Naruto's eyes twinkled. Just that if it's not Hinata you're thinking about, well, then it can only be Sakura-chan, he said, looking gleefully victorious at having made this deduction. Sasuke turned as red as a tomato and coughed nervously into his fist. For a moment, he recalled the state he and Sakura had first awakened in after coming to this crazy future, and thought again despite himself of the hospital gowns they presently wore. Anxious to distract himself from these thoughts, he tried to change the subject at least a little bit. You seemed far less upset to say that than I would have expected, Naruto, he observed in a not-so-smooth evasion. Didn't you have this big crush on her? Naruto shrugged, blushing and looking sheepish. I think maybe I still do, a little bit, he mumbled. But she's never been interested in me, right? This is the future. She's married to you. And me, I'm married to Hinata-chan. He waved a hand. I dunno, but it's made me think about some things, seeing how all this turns out. You dig? Like, what even is love, really? I thought I knew, but I'm starting to think I really didn't. Sakura-chan's pretty, and it's fun to be around her, but is love something you feel right away, or something you learn to share, or something you do because you're supposed to? I can't say. We're still just kids. Heck, maybe we aren't supposed to know who we want to spend the rest of our lives with yet, and maybe I was just telling myself that I like Sakura-chan because that's what seemed like the normal thing or because she liked you. Naruto said this last bit with a guilty expression, meeting Sasuke's eyes. Maybe I thought that if I got her to like me and not you, it'd be like I'd finally beaten you at something. He then shook his head. But that's not what love is really about, is it? That's dumb, and I'm dumb for thinking like that, but even then, somehow Hinata-chan still manages to. He blushed, trailing off with a thoughtful expression. Sasuke stared, dumbstruck. Wow, that actually sounds really mature. Eh? You think so? Naruto said dubiously. Seriously? Yeah. It sounds like something an adult would say, somehow. Huh. Maybe, Naruto shrugged. But honestly, despite all that fancy talk, a big part of it is how much Sakura-chan punches me. She does it a lot, and it really hurts. I probably shouldn't like her as much as I do, when you think about it. Yes, you're probably right, Sasuke agreed, wincing sympathetically. Well, Hinata? Can you see them? With some degree of trepidation, Sakura asked the Hyuga this question. Yes, came Hinata's meek answer, the woman managing a bashful expression even with her eyes white and rimmed by bulging veins. I can, see them while I can't see outside this wing. It, looks like they have seals to block against, but I can see them, yes. Her expression was frozen like a deer in headlights, and her mumbling was a cross between adorable and exasperating. Blocked against? Kind of an odd wording, Sakura muttered before shaking her head. Well, anyways, how are the boys? Do they seem okay? Why yes, Hinata stammered. They're fine. Her face was bright pink, and Sakura did not fail to notice. A light bulb went off in her head. Wait, she said. They aren't. Sakura looked down at her and Hinata's hospital gowns, these frumpy, backless, barely modest things Shizen-san had told them to wear. Her cheeks burned when the obvious point finally registered. Hinata blushed and nodded. Oh, Sakura squeaked, eyes widening considerably. Oh. I am so sorry, Hinata. And also way jealous. Part of her wanted to add. Ruefully, the pinkette recalled how she had woken up in bed with Sasuke on their first day in the future, and in a repressed corner of her adolescent mind wished that she had, at the time, taken more effort to appreciate the view. It had been weird at first, but now that she had gotten used to the idea of these adult bodies. Hinata did a sort of non-committal half-shrug and deactivated her. Quietly she stared at her feet, obviously a bit embarrassed. It's okay, she said, smiling a tad abashedly. You were just concerned about Sasuke-kun and Naruto-kun, and I'm the only one who could check up on them without leaving this room. I understand. I don't mind. But I do! Exclaimed inner Sakura. I'm the only one allowed to look at Sasuke-kun's tush. Yeah. Shinaro. Sakura blushed at this, as though inner Sakura was a person standing in the room with them and those words were actual verbal speech, rather than just a moderately comedic literary device to show the contrast between the sweet, prim, girlish persona she projected and the crazed, angry, sweaty animal she really was deep down. Which could itself be taken as a mild commentary on the significant gap between society's ideals and what it actually fosters. But the door to their room opened before any more half-assed philosophy could be regurgitated onto the screen, and in stepped Shizen carrying an electronic tablet thingy in her hand. Closing the door behind herself, she greeted Hinata and Sakura with a nod. Hello, girls. Sorry for making you wait, but I had to check up on a few other things first. Sakura frowned a touch peevishly at this statement, and crossed her arms over her chest. Her expression was basically a pout, and conveyed none of the severity or authority that her face could manage. She just didn't have the experience, or subtlety or menace of her adult self, and it really showed. Especially in her eyes. She looked like a surly kitten despite possessing the visage of an austere tigress, and this contrast left Shizen struggling not to giggle. At the other end of the spectrum, Hinata mumbled a soft greeting, clearly self-conscious and shy in her present state. Even if her entire extended family basically had X-ray vision and could see through both walls and clothes, as well as many other things besides, it was still a whole other matter to have one's back actually physically exposed, especially for a person who suffered from so many problems in the realms of confidence and social anxiety. Shizen afforded Hinata a warm smile and made an effort not to show any dismay at seeing the First Lady of Konoha regress to such a state as this. What did they want us for this time, Shizen-san? Queried Sakura in a faux courteous tone. Do you know? Of course you do. Tell us and get it over with, you old hag. We have better things to do with our time. Was not said aloud, and Sakura did a good job of hiding her irritation, but there was a tension in the air nonetheless. As with any doctor visit, or any social interaction really, this was an exercise in patience and politeness, both things the pinkette was pretty good at faking. Shizen nodded, pretending not to notice the tone of irritation in Sakura's voice. It's just an obligatory physical, mostly. You girls have been doing a lot of training to overcome that chakra anemia, but we still want to check for any side effects or anomalies. Sakura smiled falsely and pointed to one of the machines to which she and Hinata were hooked. Those are new, she said lightly, making a pointed observation and framing it as a casual remark. Shizen cocked her head and looked at the machines as though noticing them for the first time, which was total bull because she had been the one to hook the girls up in the first place. Ah. So there are, she said vaguely. What are they for? Sakura inquired, more direct now in her interrogatives. Shizen pursed her lips. It's technical, very complicated. You probably wouldn't understand, she said. This much was true. But basically, they're just there to check for anomalies in your chakra. This was a partial truth. It's nothing too important, honestly. That was a lie. Hinata could tell, and so could Sakura. Neither one challenged it, however. There were more important matters to cover. Konohamaru Sarutobi was not at home in the laboratory of Konoha's Shinobi Hospital. He was a fighter, not a doctor, and if he could help it he would never set foot in places like these. Mitsuki wanted him here though, for whatever reason, and he had nothing better to do seeing as how half his team was currently pretty much under house arrest. So here he was. Stiff as a board with hands securely at his sides, Konohamaru stared in ill-disguised bewilderment at a bristling array of stainless steel instruments, cutting-edge computers, and assorted tissue and fluid samples. This was not his environment. He didn't know the first thing about half this stuff. 3/4 of it. Okay, he effectively recognized nothing. That wasn't the point, though. Well, fine, it was partially the point, but primarily it was that Mitsuki looked perfectly at home among all this, even though his sensei was at a complete loss, and the young man worked like the master of a craft, ferrying samples and data sheets between stations, operating state-of-the-art machinery like it was old hat. Konohamaru couldn't help but gape a little. It was nothing less than humbling, and it made him feel so proud. The aim of any decent teacher was naturally to see their students surpass them, and right now it was clear to him just how highly skilled and specialized Mitsuki was. The young man was an elite member of Konoha's medical corps, and that made him an invaluable asset on the field. Even if he wasn't as strong a fighter as Sarada or Boruto, he was just as indispensable as they were on missions, if not even more so. High-level bruisers, jutsu experts, and combat specialists were a dime a dozen, so to speak. Just about any ninja could throw a punch, or swing a sword, or manipulate the intangible essences of mind and body into arcane spells and illusions capable of warping the very laws of nature. That was amateur hour in the world of Shinobi. In contrast, soldiers with a baseline talent and proficiency in field medicine and the restorative arts were rare, and genuine masters of healing were priceless, one in a million treasures. It was almost impossible to find ninja with any sort of knack for your ninjutsu. Their tactical, strategic, and logistical value could hardly be overstated, either. How did Boruto put it? Going on an A-rank mission without a medic is like Ironmanning a post-endgame dungeon without a cleric, insanity at the most generous, and basically asking to get party wiped on the first floor. Konohamaru didn't understand half of that lingo, but the point was still obvious. Medic nin were worth their weight in gold, and for a good reason. Soldiers with the ability to keep other soldiers fit and fighting were a godsend no matter the occasion, and the ability to minimize needless casualties was both humanitarian and pragmatically ideal. There was a reason Konoha had such a long-standing tradition of assigning at least one medic to every team. So Konohamaru respected his student, and he was as proud of Mitsuki's accomplishments in medicine as he was of Boruto and Sarada's more relatable feats as fighters. Even if he didn't understand all of it, he appreciated what the kids did, and he knew that he had taught them well. Thus he respected Mitsuki's workspace and politely, sensibly refrained from touching anything. That, and it all looked both important and expensive, and he did not feel like getting in trouble. "You see anything interesting?" he asked his student after this lengthy silence of waiting with slowly diminishing patience for the lad to say something. Mitsuki looked up from some kind of fancy microscope-seeming thingamajig and shrugged. "Nothing that would make sense to anyone without an extensive background in radiation and theoretical physics," was his prompt and frank reply. "But these chakra samples might be useful to Bolt and Sarada. They think cross-referencing any anomalies here with the hyperdimensional wave patterns they've been compiling might help pin down the universe their jutsu created." A pause. Or would it be the universe their jutsu accessed? Mitsuki wondered to himself, stroking an imaginary beard. "I don't know, paratemporal causality isn't my thing. I'm a doctor. I deal with biology." Konohamaru blinked. Yeah," he said intelligently, clearing his throat and nodding. "Sure, that sounds like it could work." "You didn't understand a word of that, did you?" "I zoned out as soon as you said nothing that would make sense," Konohamaru admitted. Mitsuki shrugged. "Fair enough. Just think of it like cosmic forensics, basically. The chakra of our guests is like a shoe, and I'm essentially the quirky but charming lab technician tasked with checking the dirt and the treads for any distinctive traces of rare or region-specific chemicals, minerals, plant fibers, or junk. Zoom and enhance," he said with a chuckle, making his sensei laugh. "Oh, okay. That makes sense." "No, it still really doesn't. But then, things involving those two rarely ever do." Mitsuki shook his head bemusedly. "Seriously, how is it that I am the most normal member of our team?" "Hey, I'm not that weird," Konohamaru laughingly protested. "Are we pretending that I never walked in on your and Hanabi-san's hideous depravity then?" We were having a thumb war, Konohamaru deadpanned. Exactly. You perverts make me sick, Mitsuki drawled. Seriously, what's so perverted about that? Konohamaru demanded in bewilderment. Beat. Don't you get it? Mitsuki said. You two were fingering each other. Fingering. He got a smarmy grin the second he said this, and Konohamaru twitched. Nobody with a sense of humor that awful has any right to call themselves normal, he muttered. Once again, Mitsuki shrugged. Must I bring up the fact that you also spend half your time publicly prancing around in the guise of a naked woman? That's not normal in any context. Hanabi likes it, Konohamaru reflexively sniped. Ugh, keep your sex life out of this, Mitsuki said, making a face. Konohamaru flushed scarlet. Gee, get your head out of the gutter, smartass, he said. I just meant she thinks it's funny. Right, Mitsuki rolled his eyes. Funny. The same way Tamaki-san thinks it's funny when Kiba-san strips down, puts on a dog collar, and licks peanut butter from her. No! Konohamaru yelped. Sheesh. Where do you even hear this stuff? Mitsuki smiled politely. You learn a lot about a man's sex life when you spend 20 minutes dislodging an ornamental dog tail plug from his. Konohamaru blanched. Okay. I get it. No need to go into graphic detail. Mitsuki smiled. That's what I thought, Redheart. Yamato, also known as Tenzo, also known as Kino, was in a reasonably good mood as he headed back to work from his lunch break. His eyes were crinkled in a pleasant smile, and there was the slightest skip in his step. Despite everything that had happened with the Hokage and his friends and the kids lately, today was a good day for the veteran ANBU captain. It really did make his work feel a lot more rewarding just to know that there would be a beautiful, loving wife to greet him when he got home. Merely thinking about his dear Yukimi and the dimpled freckles of her bright, welcoming smile made Yamato feel twice as vibrant. She was his morning dew and midday sun, the twinkle of her eyes and the press of her lips better able to sustain him than any coffee or bento. They talked again the night before about trying for a kid. While such discussion might have stressed or tensed the younger man, and made other men his age worry about various matters of virility and stability, Yamato felt more than ready for a child. Some would say the two of them were far past the age to consider such things, being well into their 40s and nearing the big 50, but with medical science as good as it was and life expectancies for Shinobi higher than they'd ever been before, he saw no reason why it shouldn't be possible. It was probably because he was getting past his prime that Yamato really felt the desire to have a son or daughter. He was over the hill, he'd surmounted the peak, and now he was starting to go down the other side. His body was no longer able to handle the intensive training regimens of his youth, and already he had noticed signs of slowed reflexes and flagging stamina. No amount of training could entirely forestall the inevitable march of time, and sooner or later, more likely sooner than not, Yamato would have to excuse himself from field duty as an ANBU and graduate to less intensive work as a senior administrator. That, or retire from active service altogether and live off his generous pension as a seasoned and accomplished Black Ops agent. Either way, what better time was there to think about having kids? Yes, there would be naysayers and genuine difficulties. Yamato had no illusions about what impact the nearly sleepless lifestyle of the parents of an infant would have on his aging body, and the stresses of child-rearing probably would be harder on Yukimi and himself than they'd be on another, younger couple. But he felt like the potential rewards outweighed the risks, and so did Yukimi. And even if they weren't successful in conceiving, there was still plenty of reward to be found just in trying. Shallower souls might be off-put at the thought of a man who showed his age as outwardly as Yamato did copulating with his wife who, while having aged a touch more gracefully with her civilian lifestyle and generally low-stress outlook, still looked much closer to 50 than 30. But he believed it was a beautiful thing the two of them shared, and she wholeheartedly concurred. So yes, the two of them had made some very intensive love the night before, and that morning, and during his lunch break. And they had enjoyed it thoroughly, gray hairs, wrinkles, stretch marks and all. But that aside, Yamato had also had a good day in much simpler ways. He'd woken on the right side of the bed, so to speak, and it felt like there was a little ray of sunshine following him all throughout the morning. He'd felt unusually well rested and content filing the paperwork from his latest mission, and even their usual lunch had tasted extra savory. Life today just seemed especially worth living, and Yamato felt like there was nothing that could possibly ruin his mood as he headed back to ANBU HQ. So, of course, he had to run into something guaranteed to make his day 100 times more complicated. "Excuse me, Yamato-san, was it?" A young sand shinobi addressed the leathery-faced campaigner, appearing from amidst the midday rush of foot traffic. "I have a letter here from Garasama, and I am supposed to deliver it to the Lord Seventh. Would you happen to know where I could find him?" Yamato blanched. While he had not been part of the initial briefing, as one of the highest-ranking ANBU in the village, he had still been assigned to watch over Naruto and the others numerous times over the past months. I can take it to him for you," he said in as polite a tone as he could muster despite being so knocked off balance. "No, I'm sorry, but my orders were very clear. I must deliver this directly to either Lord Naruto or his advisor." The Suna ninja gave Yamato a blandly apologetic look. "I see," Yamato said, forcing himself to smile. "Well, Hokage-sama is indisposed at present, but I can take you to Shikamura-san." It was likely a sign of the young ninja's professionalism that they did not so much as raise an eyebrow at the word indisposed. "I see. Thank you for the assistance." Yamato nodded weakly. "Why, yes, of course," he said. Inwardly, he cringed. Call it an old soldier's intuition, but Yamato had a feeling that this was going to be a mess. And he'd probably be the one who had to clean it up, too. Fantastic. Clang, clang, clang. Chitter, chitter. Ho, ho, ho. Chuckling amusedly to himself, Hiruzen turned the key protruding from the back of the toy monkey and watched as it once more banged its cymbals, then bared its teeth, clever clockwork mechanisms causing it to produce a clicking, chattering sound. Sandaime smiled at the little toy monkey dressed in miniature robes. It was a fascinating contraption, this tiny simian effigy of himself, something he had only recently stumbled across while going through some of his old things. Idly, he tried to remember how he had come into possession of it. He felt like he had a faint memory of a traveling craftsman presenting this to him as a sort of tribute, or maybe he had bought it at a festival. Or had Jiraiya sent it to him in a callow jest? He could not rightly recall. Well, it wasn't like the origins of the toy particularly mattered. It was an amusing distraction either way. Chuckling to himself yet again, the third Hokage once more turned the dial. Danzo glowered. "Please don't ignore me, Hiruzen," he said, tapping fingers on the handle of his cane. "Nonsense," Hiruzen absently replied. "I'm not ignoring you, old friend. You have my full attention." "Really, now?" Danzo eyed the toy monkey with a scowl. "You have an interesting way of showing it, if that is the case. What was I just talking about then?" "Increased funding for research and development," Hiruzen promptly replied. "No," Danzo said, his one eye twitching. "That's not even close." Hiruzen cocked an eyebrow. "Are you sure?" he wondered skeptically. "I know what I heard. You were most assuredly talking about the budget." "That is a terribly weak bluff, Lord Hokage," Danzo drawled. "Puerile mind games won't distract me from the matter at hand." Hiruzen stared at the other man. A long, pregnant silence passed between them. Danzo twitched and glared at the toy in his leader's hands. "Put down the monkey, Hiruzen." "No, thank you. I quite like the monkey," was the Hokage's response. "Put it down," Danzo repeated, a hint of steel entering his eyes. "No." "Damn you, Hiruzen, put that blasted monkey down now. You can have it when you pry it from my cold, dead fingers." A beat. "I didn't say oh, for heaven's sake. I don't want the damn thing for myself." "Well then," Hiruzen smoothly said, turning the dial again and causing the toy to once more chitter and bash its cymbals. "I don't see what our problem is." "Hiruzen," Danzo softly, dangerously whispered. "Put that monkey down and look at me." "No, I'd rather not." Danzo exhaled, tensely gritting his teeth, and with some effort he tried to repress a rising urge to strangle his old friend and rival. Between Hiruzen's refusal to look him in the eye and the accursed, tinny clatter of that obnoxious noisemaker, he did not have very much success. I swear to God, Hiruzen, either you put that monkey down or I will murder you. That's nice, Danzo. Clang, clang, clang. Chitter, chitter. Ho ho ho. Danzo roared and snatched the toy monkey out of Hiruzen's hand, before turning and whipping that noisy Shinobi as hard as he could at the nearest wall. It crashed into the wood paneling, then slid down to the floor. Once more it banged its cymbals, looking remarkably unscathed. Hiruzen gave his friend a disapproving look. Really, Danzo? There was hardly any call for that. Danzo glared daggers at the Sandaime. Are we going to completely ignore the elephant in the room, then? He said slowly. I'm not sure what you mean, Hiruzen airily replied. Irritatingly, Danzo jabbed a finger in the direction of Naruto Uzumaki, who had spent the entire duration of their exchange quietly perusing a scroll of Kenjutsu, forbidden space-time techniques, in other words. The old warhawk's one visible eye twitched violently, and his teeth audibly gnashed with a painful grinding sound. Oh, that, said Hiruzen blandly, as though he had only just remembered the boy's presence. What about it? Why is he here? He can hardly take the scrolls out of the office, Hiruzen smartly answered. Do you think this is a lending library? Naruto looked up from one of the unfurled scrolls and cocked an eyebrow. Sardonically, he said, What, you mean it isn't? Huh. I guess that would explain the lack of library cards and junk, but then what on earth was the point of doing my sexy librarian jutsu? What would be the point of not using it whenever you have the slightest excuse? Hiruzen said in return. Naruto laughed. Danzo glowered at both of them. I absolutely despise you too, he said. Utterly and completely, with every last ounce of my soul. That's nice, Hiruzen said pleasantly, smiling and clasping his hands. Yeah, that's nice, Gramps, Naruto added cheekily. He then paused. Danzo looked ready to scream and rip his hair out by the roots. Cafeteria? Timeline Gamma. The future. And so it has been decided that I shall pay you a visit, not as the Lord Fifth Kazekage, but as a close personal friend. I hope my presence will not overly tax you, for I do not wish to worsen your condition, whatever it may be, but I can hardly stand by and do nothing while you are ill. Look for my arrival within the next fortnight. It is only with significant reluctance that I forestall my departure by even this little, but I dare say that you more than most can understand the difficulties of arranging for any manner of personal trip as one who holds the title of Kage. Ideally, this message should reach you well after my arrival, but I understand that anything can happen on a mission. Still, I trust that no matter which ninja of my village is charged with delivery of this missive, they will do everything within their power to accomplish their task in a prompt and professional manner. Shikamaru paused, glancing up from the unfurled scroll in his hand, and looked askance at the androgynous young San Chunin whom Yamato had escorted to the cafeteria right as he and his wife were finishing up with their lunch. Part of him puzzled at Gaara sending a letter by foot rather than calling or sending an email. Or hell, even at least just using a proper courier ninja, Naruto might have been blacklisted by the guys, but that had never stopped them from delivering to Konoha in general. But whatever, that wasn't the point. He hummed to himself, idly eyeing the sandy-haired youth. They averted their gaze sheepishly in response, although there was no way they could have been aware of what the letter said. But then maybe they just had a general common-sense awareness of how unreasonably long it had taken them to carry this message hither. The date at the top showed that the letter had been written 15 days ago. Half a month. Konoha and Suna were not nearly that far apart. Moreover, Shikamaru was not ignorant to how long a fortnight was. He looked sideways at Temari, his wife, who had just been about to part ways with him when Yamato first showed up with this messenger in tow. She met his eyes with a knowing look, and even without reading the letter over her husband's shoulder she would have been able to guess its contents. He grimaced. When you say your brother called you the other day, Shikamaru began. 2.5 weeks, or so, Temari said, looking a touch sheepish despite herself. Give or take. Honestly, I only remembered it today because I saw someone who looked just like Gaara on the way here. She pursed her lips, then, and furrowed her brow. A vein throbbed in her temple. In hindsight, it probably was him, she muttered, sounding a touch miffed. He didn't even bother to say hello though, and there's no way he didn't see me. Fuck, Shikamaru groaned. So Gaara's in the village, and no one bothered to tell me. Fantastic. The Sannin looked distinctly contrite upon hearing this. Oh. And my apologies, Shikamaru-sama. If I'd known the letter was that important. Temari gave the kid a disapproving look. They quailed under her stern gaze. Shikamaru sighed. Yamato, go inform Shizen-sen that the esteemed Lord Kazekage has chosen to pay us a visit. Leave it up to her to judge what to do about her patients. He nodded to the ANBU captain and gave him a meaningful glance. Yamato made a good effort at biting back the weary, frustrated moan that threatened to leak out, but he couldn't quite hide the miserably "damn it, I knew this would happen" look on his face. Then Shikamaru glanced over at his wife. His expression was half imploring and half exasperated. Temari smiled sympathetically. I'll help, see if I can't find my dear baby brother, she offered. Shikamaru looked ready to kiss her. Thank you, he said. That means I just have to contact Lord Hokage. Hopefully this news won't be too much of an unpleasant surprise to him. Shit, Kakashi miserably groaned under his breath. Inwardly he felt a new gratefulness for the mask covering his mouth. That made it a lot easier to pretend he was smiling. More loudly, next, he said, hello, Kazekage-sama. What brings you here? Shikamaru and Temari looked at each other, standing outside the ajar door to the Hokage's office. In unison, they sweat dropped. Well, this simplifies the first step, at least, Temari murmured. What a day, Shikamaru sighed. Gaara, the Lord 5th Kazekage of the Hidden Sand Village, greeted Kakashi, the Lord 6th Hokage of the Hidden Leaf, with something that might have been a delicately arched eyebrow, had he any eyebrows to arch, as well as a more readable silent stare. Looking as clean-cut and professional as he did, there was something doubly potent to his glance, and Kakashi did well to react only as much as he did. The Hokage folded his hands atop the desk and quietly matched Gaara's stare. Shikamaru and Temari hesitated outside the door. No matter how mature or experienced a person grew, there were just some things in which no sane person would want to interfere, and this was by and far one of the biggest ones. There was a limit to what discipline and willpower alone could get a person to dare. Hello, Lord 6th, Gaara said in as even a tone as ever. Please call me Gaara. As I said in my letter, I come here not in any official capacity as the Kazekage, but simply as a friend of Naruto's. I understand he is unwell? Something shrewd and dangerously calculating glinted in turquoise eyes, but the rest of his expression betrayed nothing overall. A single bead of sweat trickled down Kakashi's brow. Yes, something along those lines, he said, clearing his throat and bluffing as truthfully as possible. Sakura is also under the weather, and it's taken both myself and Tsunade-sama to keep things running smoothly in Naruto's absence, so you can understand the delay in their recovery. Is their condition life-threatening? Gaara queried. I haven't heard anything from Naruto in a few months, and while by itself that would only be mildly disconcerting as we are both very busy men, adding on the news that he has been on medical leave, well, I dare say you can understand why I might be concerned. Yes, of course, Kakashi nodded. Diplomatically, he added, well, it's not dangerous, per se, but it has left him and the others, less than fit to carry out their duties. It was difficult at the best of times to balance disclosure and secrecy, particularly in matters only tangentially related to the political panacea that was security, and Gaara was both highly perceptive and a very close ally. He would need to be drunk, concussed, and unconscious not to see the signs of all the details Kakashi was omitting. Gaara narrowed his eyes infinitesimally. Unfit in what way, I wonder? Surely you don't mean to say that he is not even in the state to meet with a visitor? A friend and well-wisher, if nothing else. Well, he is rather disoriented, as are the others, Kakashi said. His eyes flitted to the left as he then added, the medication they are on has some side effects. It might be difficult for them to recognize you. What is he suffering from, then? Kakashi looked Gaara straight in the eye. It's very complicated, he said. I can barely explain it myself. Can you give me a general idea at least? Gaara asked. Even if my friend is tranquilized and barely coherent, I still wish to pay him a visit. Kakashi slowly nodded, and his eyes wandered marginally over the room. He chanced to look out the ajar door and spy the Nara's eavesdropping, or at least inasmuch as anyone with their elite rank and sky-high clearance could realistically get to dropping eaves. Rokudame's eyes crinkled with a smile. Well, your sister and brother-in-law can probably explain it better than I can. He gestured to the door, beckoning the Naras in. Shikamaru sighed. Temari cursed under her breath. Gaara turned and eyed them expectantly. Hyuga Manor Training Grounds. Timeline Beta. The past. Very good, Niji-Nizan, Hanabi-chan. Just like that. Step, step, pivot and jab, Hinata serenely called out to her cousin and baby sister. A calm smile adorned her face while bulging, pearlescence surveyed their practice from the corner of her eye. A calligraphy brush daubed with bluish gleaming black ink swept gracefully down a scroll resting on Hinata's lap, sharp yet daintily controlled movements minute enough that one unfamiliar with the concepts of writing or drawing might be forgiven for mistaking them as arthritic spasms swiftly yet precisely forming the neatly flourished strokes of kanji and kana. Her text was flowery enough to betray that she was well versed in the arts of traditional calligraphy, while still being neat and simple enough to be jotted down economically and efficiently. Her writing was small but clear, and already a third of the scroll was adorned with it. Hinata hummed to herself as she wrote, secure in the knowledge that neither Niji nor Hanabi would try to sneak a peek. Not after the disapproving look she'd sent them last time, a maternal hidden that she had long ago perfected as the mother of 2 Uzumaki children, one of them a teenager. It went without saying that she had gotten extensive practice in guilting people with just a look. Niji and Hanabi moved rhythmically and methodically through gentle fist sets, the elder of the two faltering a little more frequently than the younger. Superficially that might have seemed odd, but once you understood the situation it wasn't that surprising. Niji's arms, legs, and torso were being weighed down with 5 kilograms each, after all, for a collective weight of more than 55 extra pounds. Maybe not that impressive on a set of dumbbells, but 5 kilos of constant weight on each limb as well as his core? Apply that resistance to every movement, and it represented an increasing drain on his strength and stamina over time. So he and Hanabi were going through the sets at a reasonably equal pace. More importantly, this hindrance was helping Niji build up the speed of his strikes and dodges, although he had to alternate daily between training encumbered and training unencumbered so as to maintain a tight feel and precise timing with his movements. Hinata took a moment from writing to massage her wrist, which bore a concealed weight thrice as dense as Niji's. It took her a conscious effort to hold back on compensating for the added resistance with strength-boosting chakra manipulation, but it was worth the concentration. Still, a part of her mused that this was about the extent to which her young body could be physically conditioned without having adverse effects on future growth. Also probably around the same level as Lee had been at during the Chunin exams last time, though of course, at their current respective biological ages an extra year of growth could still make a world of difference, and Lee was doubtless capable of handling a third again this much weight, by now. But that wasn't really important, merely a tangential musing on her part. Hinata paused for a moment, lifting her brush from the paper. A thoughtful frown creased her brow as she tried to compose the next sentences in her head. She knew what she wanted to say, more or less, and she had by now made several of the critical points quite clear. There was a bit more still to be said, though, part clarification and part tying things all together. Now she basically just needed to bring it all to its conclusion without leaving too many loose ends. She couldn't think of how to do this yet, however. Her composition was quite long, and reading through all the scrolls she had filled could easily become the work of a few days. There was probably a lot she had forgotten about. Heaven only knew how many details she had put into the text. A lot of it was fluff, filler as some might unkindly call it, pretty but meandering fat dumped out by her pen while trying to plan the next part. Despite an extensive portfolio and modest reputation, she didn't have the habits of a professionally trained writer, and tended to fly by the seat of her pants with few if any real plans beforehand. And while this was not exclusively detrimental or without its own stylistic benefits, stream of consciousness plotting could easily drive her into a corner if she wasn't careful, whether she was writing a novel or composing a letter. It was important to Hinata, too, that she got this down good and coherent now. It was a matter of pride as much as it was a matter of making sure her reader would at least get the gist of everything she was trying to say. Even if they didn't appreciate all of it, and even if they didn't necessarily understand the conclusion she reached, Hinata still wanted to get all of this said and done with. Basically, writing was hard, and writers block the coldest bitch this side of the Ice Queen. But should that even really need to be said? Sakura hummed cheerfully as she added a quick sketch and a few more notes, diagrams and explanations that would make the average person's head spin, to the contents of her scroll. It was very simplified by her standards, using language as broad and approachable as she could manage, though still only a rather well-read individual would be able to appreciate it all. Sasuke, sitting next to her, glared at his own scroll. He clutched a brush in hand, fiddling it anxiously back and forth while chewing on his lower lip. "This is tedious," he muttered. Looking sidelong at his wife, he added a touch imploringly, "Can't you do it for me, Sakura? Honey?" "I shouldn't," Sakura said. "You know what Naruto said. These are important messages. It's inane. We shouldn't have to say these things at all." Sakura silenced him with a stern look. "We have to take responsibility," she said firmly. "Even if it's not our fault, we should still be adults about the situation." "Damn it, you have a point," he sighed. "I always do," she said chipperly. Sasuke stared at his paper for several moments more. His expression was blank, hand twitching. Pursing his lips, he wrote a single sentence. "Sorry about the arm." He set his brush down and surveyed his scroll, on which that sentence, and only that sentence, was written. Then he noticed Sakura shooting him a dirty look. "What?" he asked. "Ugh. Give me that," she muttered, snatching the scroll away from her husband. "Honestly, sometimes you are just impossible, dear. I swear, if it weren't for that pretty face, I wouldn't know what to do with you." Sasuke smiled sheepishly. "Fair enough. But it is a very pretty face," he said. "Yes," Sakura agreed, grinning a bit wryly. "Yes, it certainly is." Turtle Island. Timeline Gamma. The future. "Yo, Hatsun, listen up, I really gotta know," rapped the bearded, aging Killer Bee without the slightest hint of irony or self-awareness, addressing his bijou in the darkness of his meditative mindscape. "What's the deal? What's going on with our buddy Naruto?" "Gyuki, the eight-tailed octopus/bull demon/Ushioni," rumbled a noncommittal reply. "How should I know, B? It's not as though I can read his mind, let alone from this far away." Killer Bee, seated atop his bijou pal's head inside the limitless shared metascape of their minds, stroked his beard thoughtfully. Then he grinned. "Hey! Telepathy, don't you know, ain't that a bijou thing? Yo, get on up and just like that, give Kurama a ring." Gyuki blinked. "Oh, that's right. I'd completely forgotten about that," he said. "Grandfather Rikudo even set up a special mental space for it in Kurama's seal, didn't he? Wow. That would have been really useful to remember back when those Otsutsuki jerks tried to abduct me. I could have warned Kurama in advance and everything." He cocked an eyebrow and looked down at the Hachibi. Gyuki flushed. "Oh, shut up," he grumbled. "It's not like you're any better." He laughed. Grumbling, Gyuki closed his eyes and reached out to the shared mindscape of the 9 bijou. He resonated his chakra with the matching seed of energy in Naruto's system, splitting his consciousness across time and space to interact directly with his sibling. If he had to describe the process, he'd compare it to quantum entanglement and theoretical FTL communication. Except it wasn't really a theory for the bijou. Gyuki winced a bit, feeling his awareness split and double as his chakra resonated with Kurama's, as well as his own in Naruto's system. Ugh. This always gave him such a headache. "Kurama. Oi, Kurama, are you there?" He thought in the direction of his brother. The Nine-Tails could be rather insufferable at times, but Gyuki was used to it, and prepared to deal with whatever petty bitching the fox might lodge at him for disturbing his beauty sleep. "Kindly respond if you can hear me." For a moment, there was only empty quiescence. Then he perceived a belated stirring of will, and a great piercing eye of crimson. He felt his brother's chakra twist and swell like the current of a rising tide, massive in comparison to the seed of his essence planted in that space. The air shuddered with a rumbling noise, except there was no air and no noise, it was all thought and chakra and conceptual elements. "Hachibi? How are you? No, why are you?" Kurama's visage took shape from a sea of red, the fiery essence of his soul, and Gyuki shaped his own chakra to create a representation of himself as well. He frowned perplexedly, meeting Kurama's eyes. Don't you remember that telepathy space grandfather Rikudo created after the fight against Kagaya? He said. Oh wow, I had completely forgotten, Kurama said. He then blinked. Wait, how do you remember that? It hasn't even happened yet in this timeline, if it will happen at all. Wait, what? Gyuki said. Did you hit your head, Kyubi? And can concussions even affect us in the first place? Kurama frowned. He eyed his brother shrewdly, lowering his ears and baring a few of his teeth. Hackles rose fractionally, just enough to betray a cautious wariness. What's the name of the fifth Reikage? He asked tersely. Gyuki said without missing a beat. No, not his title, Kurama said peevishly. His name. Now Gyuki frowned, thoroughly confused. It's Darui, of course. But why do you ask? There was an extended moment of silence. What year is it? He queried. I don't know. Do we even have an established calendar or count of years? Gyuki said, humming quizzically. I have no idea, Kurama confessed, scowling and pensively scratching his muzzle. Humph. But this is strange, he said. How are you able to talk to me like this? It seems like it's really you. It's telepathy, Gyuki said, eyeing Kurama curiously. We've had this since forever. No, Kurama said, shaking his head. I mean, since I got sent back in time with Naruto and the others, how the hell are we even talking? Gyuki went silent for a long, awkward moment. Wait, what? Back in time? He finally said after taking the time for that statement to sink in. Yes, hasn't it been a few months by now on your end? Surely people must have noticed their absence, Kurama said. Or is the flow different between timelines? Well then, I think I've just figured several things at once, Gyuki said. Damn. This is awkward. I had only been calling because B wanted me to ask about Naruto. We hadn't heard anything from him in a while, and Gaara had brought it up recently, too, which I guess really got me curious, but this. Thanks for caring about me, Kurama dryly snarked. But I dare say you have your explanation then? Yes, Gyuki muttered, frowning. So I think I do. Going silent, pensive, he broke off the connection. He then opened his eyes and looked up at B. Okay, you are not going to believe this. Hokage's office. Timeline Beta. The past. I absolutely despise you too, Danzo said to Naruto and Hiruzen. Utterly and completely, with every last ounce of my soul. That's nice, Hiruzen said pleasantly, smiling and clasping his hands. Yeah, that's nice, Gramps, Naruto added cheekily. He then paused, baby blue eyes going wide as dinner plates and a ruddy complexion paling considerably. Danzo looked ready to scream and rip his hair out by the roots. His eye was bulging from its socket, and his lips were so tightly pursed it looked like he had just been sucking on a lemon. Gripping the handle of his staff with enough force to make the wood audibly crack, he took a deep breath and opened his mouth. But before he could go on a proper tirade, Naruto suddenly raised a hand to quiet him, and Danzo could only sputter disbelievingly. Naruto held a pair of fingers to his temple, slowly nodding as his expression grew more and more bewildered. Oh, while the blonde murmured, looking frankly astounded. Turning to face Hiruzen, he opened his mouth. Well, Kurama has just stumbled across a way to make contact with the other side. Hiruzen choked, and Danzo stared. That suddenly? Said the former. Wait, who the hell is Kurama? Said the latter, still looking incredibly peevish. Naruto blinked and looked at Danzo, as though suddenly realizing the man was still in the room. Okay, yeah, I might as well get this out of the way now, he said. I'm from the future, Kurama is the Ninetales, and I think I might have just figured out a way to get us back home. Or at least a way to figure out a way. Danzo gaped. He blinked once, twice. Then, he grabbed his chest and fainted. Shit, I think I just gave him a heart attack, Naruto said. We should probably call a doctor. Yes, we probably should, said Hiruzen. He was silent for another moment, before giving the blonde a pointed look. Oh, right. Naruto said. Duh. Keep forgetting we don't have phones at this time. Man, that's inconvenient. Mumbling those kinds of petty gripes to himself, he formed a shadow clone, and it darted off before the smoke was even cleared. There was another moment of silence. Naruto stood motionless. Hiruzen's eyes drifted to the toy monkey lying on the floor by the wall. It stirred, as if activated by his glance. Clang, clang, clang. Chitter, chitter. Despite themselves, the two Hokage weakly chuckled. You're serious? Shizen stared in dismay at Yamato, walking through the hospital hallway. She held a clipboard close to her chest, eyes wide and lips drawn back in something like a weak grimace. Distractedly, she brushed a loose strand of hair out of her face. Indeed I am, said Yamato wearily, sighing as he met Shizen's gaze. He's here to see the Lord Seventh, and I dare say he won't take no for an answer. Dear me, that's kind of a problem. Shizen bit her lip and looked anxiously around. Isn't it though? Yamato agreed. If this becomes any more of a mess than it already is, I just know we're the ones who will have to clean it up. Yes, we usually are, Shizen mused, looking ruefully up at the blaring fluorescent lights. Ugh. Well, maybe this will all work out fine with no trouble or complications whatsoever. And maybe Taunton will sprout wings and fly, Yamato sourly replied. Shizen sighed. No, it really isn't likely, she conceded. But a woman can hope, can't she? True, fair enough, Yamato said. Maybe you actually will get married one day. Shizen punched him on the arm, scowling darkly. That was uncalled for. She gave him a black look, pursing her lips. What's gotten into you? You're being kind of a jerk today, Yamato-san. I'm in a bad mood, he said with a shrug. This business smells ripe, and it looks ready to blow up on us at any second now. And like I said before, we're usually the ones getting stuck on figurative custodial duty. When it hits the fan, we'll be the ones getting it in our faces. Is that what you're saying? Basically. Really makes a good day feel rotten, doesn't it? Shizen glowered at nothing in particular, her expression darkening. Yeah, it really does. A beat. And for your information, I happen to be seeing a very nice man, she added with a sniff, giving Yamato a scornful look. He's quite handsome and well-to-do, and he seems very taken with me. Who is it? Yamato blandly inquired. Why, you wouldn't know him, Shizen mumbled, clearing her throat. He lives in Ati country. We exchange emails quite often. I can't show you, though, they're all pretty or steamy. Really, Yamato said? This man wouldn't happen to reside in a dating simulator, would he? Shizen glared. There's nothing wrong with that, she said a touch defensively. Uh-huh. Sure, Yamato said, nodding. Whatever you say. I won't judge. Shizen shoved him. Oh, shut up. Let's just go prepare the patients, she said. Prepare them for what? Yamato and Shizen gave a start at the new voice coming from behind them, realizing that they were no longer alone. They spun on a dime, turning around to face the speaker, and beheld the Lord Fifth Kazekage standing right before them. Turquoise eyes were rimmed with dark rings, a cosmetic remnant of his youth, and in the area of his left temple was tattooed the kanji for love. He wore the kind of natural poker face that would send pro gamblers running for the hills. Hearts loudly hammering in their breasts, Shizen and Yamato stared at Gaara. A tense silence reigned over the trio for several lengthy seconds. Temari and Shikamaru then came jogging down the hall from behind Gaara, huffing and redder in the face than they ought to have been as elite ninja. The woman and her husband were visibly a mix of flustered, frustrated, sheepish, and peevish. Yamato felt a little bit of schadenfreude in seeing the pair running after the Kazekage like a couple of common aides, but only a little. He was a nice guy, after all. This is the wing where Naruto is being held, right? Gaara said, looking at Shizen. Put on the spot, and still a tad frazzled from the man's sudden appearance, the dark-haired medic froze for just a moment. She recovered with admirable speed, though, and plastered a professionally pleasant grin across her face. Yes, it is, Kazekage-sama, she answered. But please don't spread it around. We keep this ward hidden for a reason. Temari grimaced. Yeah, Shizen? Gaara wasn't actually, given the authorization to come back here yet, she said. He just ran off from us when we got halfway to the hospital, and now that I think about it, how did he even find this ward so quickly? Sakura-san showed Kankuro and myself where it was back when you were in labor with Shikadai, Gaara said in a matter-of-fact tone. He cocked his head, looking quizzically at his big sister. Don't you remember? You are severely underestimating how many drugs they had me on, Temari reflexively answered. No way in hell was I going to give a natural birth, not when I had access to state-of-the-art medicine and first-rate care from Konoha's finest professionals. I don't remember much from that day there, Shikamaru added with a shrug. Childbirth might be a beautiful thing in an abstract, moral sense, but everything between her water breaking and cutting the umbilical cord was a frantic, sweaty, gory blur. I'd like to keep it that way. Gaara pouted. Well, we were there, he said. And that's how I knew where to find the secret ward. Why did Temari have to give birth here anyway? Yamato wondered aloud. Politics, Shizen promptly replied. That, Temari said, and a vocal minority of stubborn, xenophobic jackasses. Oh, that makes sense, Yamato said. And considering that the initial inspiration for the creation of the ward had come from a comment Naruto made to Sakura after the war about the circumstances of his mother's death, it really did. Another pregnant pause followed. Shizen looked around at the other four, bit her lip, and sighed. With an air of slight reluctance, she gestured for Gaara and company to follow her. Shikamaru looked like he was itching for a smoke, and Temari was clearly forcing herself to smile, still miffed by her baby brother's earlier rudeness. You're here to see Naruto, of course. Isn't that right? Shizen remarked, looking over her shoulder at Gaara. It was an easy deduction to make, really, hardly the makings of a mystery drama. He wouldn't have come all this way for anyone but family or Naruto, and the Naraos were all healthy as horses. Or deer. Or horse deer. Bibaka. Yes, Gaara redundantly said, as though Shizen's reckoning needed any confirmation. She nodded and absent-mindedly double-checked her clipboard. Right. This way, then. Follow me. Yamato, Temari, Shikamaru, and Gaara did as Shizen said and followed her lead through the secret ward. It wasn't long at all before she stopped, standing outside a door with the nameplates. Uchiha, Sasuke. Uzumaki, Naruto. Shizen knocked once, waiting for a reply. An impatient curse reached her ears. Shaking her head and smiling in mild exasperation, she turned the handle and ushered the others inside. Gaara was the first one through the door, followed by Shikamaru and Temari, then Yamato, and Shizen brought up the rear. The Lord Fifth Kazekage looked at the two hospital beds standing side by side in the room, the nearer one holding Sasuke and the further holding Naruto. Both men looked relatively well, if peevish, lying in the beds. They were hooked up with enough tubes and wires to star in the robotic equivalent of a tentacle hentai though, and the beeping of monitors and machines lent the scene a peculiarly ominous medical atmosphere. Naruto and Sasuke stared at the five visitors. Suddenly, the room seemed terribly crowded. The blonde looked at Gaara and frowned. Who the hell are you? Gaara stared with a twinge of visible worry, his stoic expression slowly falling away into concern, before abandoning all pretenses and hurrying to Naruto's side. Oh goodness, he whispered. It's even worse than I thought, Naruto. How long do you have left? This was a dumb question brought on by panic and needless care, a spurious assumption based on percolating fears and superficial details overwhelming an otherwise very calm and rational mind. Normally Gaara would have been able to take one look at the scene and tell that Naruto was just fine, physically, at least, under all the wires and junk, but emotional investment could make people act terribly irrational, and there were rather few individuals about whom Gaara cared as deeply as Naruto. His lover, his family, his village. Those were the only things Gaara placed as highly in care and esteem as he did the Lord's seventh Hokage, and in some ways the blonde superseded at least one or two of those. Plus, underneath the stoic intensity and unreadable expression, the Kazekage was secretly an awkward dork. So when he saw Naruto lying on a hospital bed and hooked up to like 100 different tubes and wires, possibly a slight exaggeration, he naturally freaked out and jumped to a few hasty conclusions. That was only natural, because humans are dumb and irrational creatures deep down. Naruto, at Gaara's words, went from blankly staring to blinking once, twice, thrice. His eyebrows rose into his hairline. Shizenba-chan, we're dying? Naruto exclaimed, whipping his head around to look at the woman, whose eye was twitching at being called Ba-chan. Why didn't you tell us earlier? No, Naruto, you're not, she began to say, only to be cut off by Sasuke. Oh yeah, you're dying alright? A terminal case of ignoramus syndrome, from the looks of it, the Uchiha deadpanned. Shizen shot Sasuke a black look, before she cleared her throat. No, Naruto, you're not. Is there a cure? The blonde shamelessly blubbered, tears pouring down his whiskered cheeks like twin waterfalls. Like I said, Shizen vexedly interjected. Does he need a blood transfusion? An organ transplant? Gaara asked, now looking determined. I'll do whatever it takes to save him. Shizen snapped. Pow. Bop. Wham. Naruto and Sasuke sported brand new, matching, throbbing hematoma. Gaara was bemused, a few grains of sand trickling down from a superficial crack in the sand armor on the top of his head. Shizen winced and shook a red, stinging hand. Oh wow, she whimpered, feeling like she had just punched a brick wall without using any chakra reinforcement. Snappily, she then hissed, he's not dying. Naruto blinked. Oh, he said. Then he breathed a sigh of relief. Gaara blushed underneath a concrete carapace of hardened silica granules. Oh, he said, awkwardly clearing his throat. Shizen glared. Konoha Kumo Bijou telepathy space. Error value unknown. Both neither not applicable? Killer Bee held his cell phone up as high as he could reach, precariously balancing himself on an outstretched chakra tentacle atop the highest peak he could find. The reflective outer surface of his sunglasses gleamed in the light, and his face was screwed into a look of concentration as tiny, barely visible sparks of electricity danced over his fingers. Yo, Naruto, what do you know? You say I gotta call your son, but what if that boy is busy, yo? Say, tappin' his girl's tight buns? Linked through telepathy with his sibling, Gyuki tried not to groan as he relayed his Jinchuriki's message to Kurama. The Ninetales sniggered at the embarrassment clear in his sibling's pitch and hue as the Eight-Tails conveyed B's query, with the utmost reluctance communicating it verbatim to the infuriating fox. Kurama repeated the message to Naruto with mirthful relish, greatly enjoying the surge of he felt from the blonde in response to the mental image of his son quote-unquote tapping any part of Sasuke's daughter, let alone in such a ribald manner as B's question suggested. Blushing hotly, the adult Naruto coughed into his 13-year-old fist and looked down at the scroll he'd been writing in. He absent-mindedly checked to make sure the language was clear and simple, using as few complicated kanji or technical terms as possible. After a moment, the part of his brain paying attention to this made him nod, before he cleared his throat and spoke. If he wants to tap anything of anyone before the age of 30, then he'd better answer, Naruto said sternly. I already worked out with Sakura how to route the call through my number, and you've got her instructions memorized. I don't care if I'm not personally there, Bolt will answer that call, or I will find a way to lecture him across space and time. In their telepathy zone, Kurama looked at Gyuki for a long moment. Kurama shrugged. Just do like we agreed, he blithely said. Gyuki squinted at Kurama. You are paraphrasing him rather severely, aren't you? He guessed. The Ninetales did not dignify this with a response. Sighing, Gyuki thought of his partner. We've already worked out the plan. If the boy doesn't answer, we'll figure something else out. B frowned, then shrugged. Alright, buddy, I've got a signal now. Just gotta call him up and tell him what and how. His thumb tapped a rapid sequence of numbers and symbols on the touchscreen interface of his phone. After a few seconds of input, the phone began to ring. B held it up to his ear. Thrice it rang, 3 times it rang, and thrice it went unanswered. 3 times it rang, thrice it rang, and on the 4th ring, it was answered. Mentally, B wondered if he could work those lyrics into something. Hello? Came a hoarse, raspy voice very much unlike what B remembered of Naruto's son. Who the hell are you? I know my dad's in no state to be working a phone. Keeping in mind the message Naruto had conveyed to him, and struggling against reflex to not make it rhyme or rap, Killer Bee spoke into his phone's receiver. The shitty old man says, "You're grounded, Bolt." There was a lengthy silence on the other end of the line. Old man B? Okay, what the fuck is going on here? Space-time doesn't mean shit when you have a bijou by your side, B rapped into the phone. Telepathy will seek us out, ain't nowhere we can hide. What? Gyuki patiently conveyed this exchange to Kurama. Kurama, in turn, flippantly said to Naruto, "You can probably guess how it's going." Naruto swore, before running a hand through his hair. Shit. Is that good or bad? He bleakly wondered. Killer Bee is our only realistic hope of making contact with the others in our home timeline, Kurama snarked. You tell me if that's good or bad. Kurama took this silence as his cue and sarcastically asked Gyuki, "So, how come the impossible plan is so crazy that it can only succeed?" Boruto hasn't hung up, at least, Gyuki replied. That's some good news. And B? He's being B. Secret Lab, Hokage Tower. Timeline Gamma. The future. Sarada stared bemusedly at her boyfriend, partner, as he argued with someone on his cell phone. Boruto sounded very exasperated as he asked the caller several times for verification of this or that. She could figure out, from listening to Boruto's end of the conversation, that the person he spoke to was the venerable, or at least aging of the Eight Tails, and that somehow their discussion had something to do with his father. She hadn't quite been paying attention at first when he answered the phone, but when she heard him groan and tiredly ask the caller to repeat whatever they had just said without wrapping it, "Please and thank you," she found herself getting intrigued. Thus she watched and listened with perked ears and arched eyebrows as Boruto spoke on the phone. Okay, can you tell him I've been working on identifying potential coordinates? I've been able to narrow it down to a dozen or so. Well, yes, Sarada's been helping out a lot too. A pause. Boruto's face went beet red. No, I have not been tapping that, he mumbled into the phone, low enough that Sarada reckoned he was trying, if failing, to keep these particular words inaudible to her. And even if I was, it would be really rude of me to just discuss it with anyone who asked. Sarada sighed, thinking ruefully of how little private time she and Bolt had been able to get in the past couple months. She very much would have liked to be able to brag about tapping that, a part of her thought as her eyes wandered down Boruto's back. But unfortunately they'd been so busy working on this that they really hadn't been able to make any time. Not for lack of trying either. Please don't, Boruto said on the phone. I'm sure your song is lovely, but if you're in contact with him, we really should focus on this. That is, figuring out how to reverse that whole mess. You know what they are, right? We've been using those too. A pause. What do you mean you've never heard of them? They're an elementary particle crucial to explaining the pseudo-material properties of chakra at high densities. Without them, bijou would be intangible and invisible, and like half of all jutsu in existence just wouldn't even work. Another, longer pause. Seriously, this was published in all the respected scientific journals last year, you know? All those articles about Boruto Uzumaki, the genius wunderkind who single-handedly hypothesized, observed, and proved the existence of these aforementioned? A beat, yet another pause. Bolt coughed. Okay, yes. I suppose I might have done an interview for Play Ninja Publishing as well. Cloud Village Cuties is owned by them, right? The blonde looked askance at Sarada, who looked away and pretended to still be working on the computer. Covering his mouth, Boruto then whispered into the phone, his voice just low enough that Sarada would have missed it if she hadn't actually been paying the utmost attention. Well, actually, I've always been more partial to hidden mist hotties myself. Sarada resisted the urge to giggle and snort at how secretively Boruto said this. As if she didn't know about his secret porn stash. And as if he didn't know about her secret porn stash. Or the real person/fiction about him and Mitsuki. But that was another matter altogether. Yeah, that's basically it. A bit simplified, but it seems you do get the gist of what we're doing, at least. He paused for a few seconds. What do you mean you don't? How could it be any more obvious how this should work? Ugh, okay, I guess you're not really trained in advanced physics, but can you at least tell our dads to channel their chakra? Sarada perked up at this. Again, another mention of Lord Seventh, and this time her own father as well. This was curious, and Sarada could not help but idly wonder for just a moment if Bolt was somehow talking about his actual dad, and not the scrappy loudmouth of a twerp who'd replaced him. But that couldn't possibly be the case, she told herself. Could it? Look, we have the machine right here. I can turn it on now and fire at each of the possible space-time coordinates. If all of them work together we can at least figure out when and where the hell they are. Sarada frowned. Okay, what the hell? There was no way this could be interpreted in any other way, yet there was no way that he could actually have any means to do what his words were suggesting. Not unless. No, Sarada could think of no unless. Frowning, she went over to the device in the center of the lab and fiddled with the holographic input, absently aligning it to one of the suspect coordinates. It charged for a moment, glowing brighter and brighter, before anticlimactically dimming. Boruto looked up from the phone, startled. Huh? Sarada? What are you? She ignored him and headed over at one of the monitors, tapping out a few commands and scrolling through the feedback. Her eyebrows rose into her hairline. This reading was Air Sarada? She headed back over to the device, aligning it to another set of coordinates. Again it charged before silently, motionlessly firing, and again Sarada went over to the computer. The readings she saw this time were much more normal. Hello, Sarada? Are you on autopilot or something? Boruto asked, sounding somewhere between concerned and confused. Again, she ignored him, going back to the device. This time, she cleared the coordinates, aiming it just outside of the solar system. For a third time it glowed, then dimmed. The monitor's display brought up a command prompt, and Sarada went over to type a command in. It flickered before showing a pattern that was almost eerily familiar. At last, she turned to Boruto and spoke. Belay that order, Private, she said in a mock professional voice. I've found the timeline we were looking for. Smiling, she pushed her glasses up the bridge of her nose. Your dad contacted B-san through the Bijou telepathy, didn't he? Bold blinked. Yeah? How did you know? I listened, Sarada quipped. I thought. And then I acted. The Bijou were all originally part of the same being, so of course they would resonate with their true counterparts, and not necessarily the counterparts sharing their present coordinates. Right. Boruto's eyes widened. He grinned from ear to ear in realization. Of course, he said. A colossus astride the shores of time. Gyuki and Kurama's chakra together comprised nearly half of the Jubi's power, according to Mom and Dad. Something that big would surely be enough to partially synchronize the two disparate timelines, at least for as long as they're resonating together. Sarada, you're a genius. She blushed, returning his grin with interest. You're exaggerating, she said modestly, though she clearly enjoyed the praise. No, seriously, babe. This is perfect. We know which coordinates our parents are at, Boruto said insistently. We have contact with my dad, and we can tell him which jutsu we used. This is it. This is the breakthrough we needed. We have all of the pieces at our disposal to fix this mess. It's only a matter of time now. He laughed and bounded forward, throwing his arms around Sarada. Beaming, she kissed him, and then she grabbed the phone. Tell Lord Seventh to get the others together, she told B. Call us again when they're ready. We finally have definitive progress to report. She hung up the phone. Boruto laughed and gleefully returned her previous kiss. Kanohigaku no Sato quivered along a fourth-dimensional axis, time wrinkling around the bustling city-state. The village shuddered from its deepest foundations to its highest towers, vibrating in response to an unfathomable sort of power emanating from its heart. It was like an earthquake, and yet none of the citizens noticed. This motion was not spatial, but temporal. Birds slowed to a standstill in midair, the flapping of their wings coming to a halt. Joggers began to move in reverse, going backwards up the village's routes. Flowers blossomed and then withered within mere moments. The sun flickered in the sky, moving to the eastern and western horizons in a dizzying oscillation, before finally settling into its zenith. After this turbulence and weirdness, time began to flow normally. The vast majority of Konoha's citizens knew nothing of the occurrences described in the last few paragraphs, either seeing nor feeling the oddity of it all. Ordinary humans could perceive only a linear progression of time, and if its flow seemed to slow or quicken, they could easily attribute it to a trick of their own minds. Even in Hokage Tower, in the Sandame's office at the very epicenter of this event, it was not directly observed. Theoretically, they were aware of what would happen, but only one of their number was equipped to witness even the shadow of this hypothetical motion. Naruto knelt before a sprawling seal array. His hands were clasped in a complex mudra, and his face was screwed up in a look of concentration. Arcane script and runic lettering glittered and gleamed as the flow of chakra within the circuit reached a sustainable equilibrium. "Well, Sasuke?" he said. "How does it look?" The Uchiha was too busy puking into the Hokage's wastebasket to answer. Sakura, at the same time, was rubbing her husband's in an attempt to alleviate some of his discomfort. A sympathetic smile adorned her lips. "Are you feeling okay, sweetie?" the pinkette gently inquired. "Stop the world, I want to get off," Sasuke weakly mumbled in response, distinctly green around the gills. Hinata looked from her husband to Sasuke, humming thoughtfully. "That must have been a very disorienting sight to lay you out like that, Sasuke-san," she remarked. "I don't doubt it," said Naruto blithely. "Fuck you," Sasuke grunted, glaring at the blonde in a rare show of overt displeasure. He coughed. "Fuck you, fuck time, and fuck our kids. Sarada is so grounded when we get home. Ugh." "You didn't see any turbulence then? If you think this'll be enough to get us home." "Have they seen any on their side?" Sasuke retorted. Naruto cocked his head and hummed. "Kurama says yes," he answered. "Is that verbatim, dear, or did he paraphrase them again?" Hinata wondered. "He says no," Naruto said. "I'm not sure which one to use." Reassuring, Sakura deadpanned. Sasuke finally stood back up. After wiping his mouth on the sleeve of his shirt and giving the Sandame a mildly apologetic look, he turned to face Naruto and glanced at the sprawling, glowing jutsu formula over which the blonde was crouched. He scanned the swirling eddies of chakra in a dizzyingly complex seal, the likes of which only an honest-to-goodness Uzumaki could have devised. It was an impressive sight, probably among the top 3 most subtle and intricate seals he had ever seen. And somewhere, an identical seal was being charged up by their friends and family. Sasuke closed his right eye and pushed his bangs away from the left one. He felt the floor give way under his feet and saw ripples in the fabric of space-time, threads of probability spooling together into a singular cord that stretched out into the infinite void beyond the boundaries of perceived reality. Naruto pushed a little more chakra into the jutsu formula, and Sasuke watched as everything the laypeople thought they knew about time was offhandedly defenestrated. Everything he could see visibly lurched, and Sasuke stumbled as surely as a landlubber on a stormy sea when another slight timequake ensued. "I hate this," he groaned, clapping a hand over his mouth as cheeks turned green once again. "It's a necessary discomfort," Hinata said. "Once we're back home, I am sure you will be able to sleep it off." "Not if Kakashi-sensei has anything to say about it, I bet," Sakura wryly muttered. "They've probably been run ragged without us around." "Heh. That's a lot closer to the truth than you might think," Naruto said. "At least, if what Kurama says, Gyuki says, B says, Boruto says, Sarada says is any indication." Sasuke stared into the distance for a moment, before swearing. "Christ," he moaned. "I just realized we're betting our lives on a game of Chinese telephone." A beat. "What's Chinese?" wondered Hinata. "Or a Christ?" added Sakura. "It's kind of a long story," Sasuke said. "Not really that important." Sakura squinted an eyebrow at him. He blushed and looked away. "Well," Naruto interjected, "it looks like preparations are nearly done on their end. Is there anything you still need to do before we go home?" "Besides marveling at how quickly things seem to be moving after almost a year or so of aimlessly puttering about," Sakura said. "No, I don't think so." "Hinata?" Naruto asked. "Nothing that can be done in your present body, Naruto-kun," Hinata replied with an eager glint in her eye. "It has been far too long." Naruto's face reddened, and he coughed sheepishly. All right, he said. His gaze grew distant, and he smiled a hair dreamily. You're beautiful no matter how you look, darling, but I have to admit, I am very eager to get reacquainted with the girls. He glanced south of his wife's neck for a moment. Hinata smiled knowingly and clasped her hands over her chest. I dare say they'll be glad to catch up with you as well, she said sweetly. Sakura grinned rakishly. Yeah, I agree, she said. I am so excited to finally have a real pair of tits again. And for Sasuke's dick to actually. Okay. No need to go into detail, honey. Sasuke hastily interrupted, his face beet red. Let's just get this over with, huh? It's weird having 2 arms again. I feel dirty. Grimacing, he raised a bandage-covered left hand and moved it in an awkward wave. Don't be such a baby, Naruto said, rolling his eyes. Sure, it's a little funky at first, but having a prosthetic arm isn't that bad. Better than having no arm, at any rate. I politely disagree, Sasuke sniffed. Secret Lab. Timeline Gamma. The future. Well, Sarada? You ready? Said Boruto, looking a tad anxiously at his partner and girlfriend. As I'll ever be, Sarada bleakly replied. Naruto, Sasuke, Hinata, and Sakura sat to one side of the room. Mitsuki and Konohamaru were on another side. Kakashi, Gaara, Temari, Shikamaru, Shizen, and Yamato filled out the rest of the room. Himawari was presently in school. So, Gaara said. Time travel, was it? And you didn't bother to inform me. I would have gladly assisted, you know. He gave his sister and brother-in-law a disappointed look. Yeah, okay, that one's on me, Shikamaru conceded, coughing into a fist. I helped, Temari insisted, giving her husband a hard stare. Where's Tsunade? Kakashi wondered. Covering Sakura's shift at the hospital, said Shizen. It's so crowded in here, Yamato muttered. Tell me about it, sighed Konohamaru. Do you two need any help, Bolt? Sarada? Mitsuki queried. Naruto absently squeezed Hinata's hand. She blushed a fluorescent crimson hue. Sasuke stood an inch or two closer to Sakura than to the others, and she smiled thoughtfully. All right, said Sarada, holding a cell phone to her ear. We're ready. Boruto nodded as if affirming her statement. He brought his hands up into a seal. They're ready, Hatsun. Let's get it on. Be wrapped. That sounds so wrong, Gyuki thought. The Eight Tails then addressed his sibling in their mind space. They're ready, Kurama. It's about to start. Finally, muttered Kyubi. This was getting more than a little old. Hokage's office. Timeline Beta. The past. Yo, Naruto? It's time. Kurama said this to him. Okay. The blonde nodded and looked at his wife and teammates. You ready, guys? We're about to see some serious shit. Hold on to your butts, Sakura quipped, eyes flitting appreciatively down the backs of the other three. How does the jutsu go again? Hinata wondered aloud. It was something like this, I think, said Sasuke, weaving a few seals. Naruto and Sakura nodded before joining in. Seijin, said Naruto. Hitsuji Saru ni Torainu. Ram, monkey, rat, bird, dog. Caution, said Sakura. Mi Torai ni Saru. Snake, bird, boar, rat, monkey. Jiken, said Sasuke. Hitsuji yu tatsu uma tatsu. Ram, hare, dragon, horse, dragon. Mawashi, said Hinata. Uma yu mi inu mi. Horse, hare, snake, dog, snake. Secret Lab. Timeline Gamma. The future. Saru tatsu ni torai mi ashi inu uma tora I hitsuji yu. Monkey, dragon, rat, bird, snake, ox, dog, horse, tiger, boar, ram, hare. No jutsu. Chimed Boruto and Sarada. Beat. For a moment, everything stood absolutely still. All heat, all motion, all time froze in a singularity as heavy as the very planet itself. The air was molasses, the sun's rays like daggers of ice, and the heart of Konoha was perfectly silent. A pin dropped. Energy was equal to the value of mass multiplied by the speed of light to the second power. Within every atom lay a world of potential, all matter capable of conversion into pure heat and motion. Potential realized, bond severed, substance obliterated. Power was lost in the most devastating expression conceivable. There was a flash of light, a booming sound, and heat. To say Konoha was leveled would be a gross understatement. It was completely annihilated, all matter within it converted directly into energy. This was no fission cascade, no atomic detonation. This was instantaneous and absolute destruction, akin to a matter-antimatter reaction. The explosion was bright enough to eclipse the sun, its sound a shockwave that leveled everything short of mountains out to the most distant horizon. Earth buckled and cracked, the crust splitting open with a deep rupture, the crater from this blast enough to expose the planet's liquid mantle. Lava flowed up and out like blood from a stab wound, spilling over the land. Dust and smoke and ash rose in a mushroom cloud vast enough to blot out the sky, thick enough to linger for many years, black enough to cast a midnight gloom over the elemental nations. An ice age would come, a winter to last for 7 years to the 7th power. The world was irrevocably changed, a blow which could very well spell the end of the Shinobi era, if not all of humanity. It was an event comparable to, nay, exceeding that which killed off the dinosaurs, a global catastrophe that would change the face of the very Earth itself. This was one way their attempt to reverse the time travel could go, and in accordance with multiverse theory this was undoubtedly one of the ways that it did go in a great number of divergent timelines. Every action brought another fork in the path, and every possible result played out simultaneously. The world could be destroyed, time could be unraveled and reduced to a single point, the universe could be wiped clean in a hard reset of causality, the two disparate timelines could be mashed back together with adult and child minds inhabiting the same bodies, and nothing could happen at all. All of this, and every other conceivable outcome, would and did happen in at least one timeline. But thanks to a mix of quantum immortality, anthropic principle, and plain old narrative bias, for the sake of this tale we shall follow our heroes into the one outcome where they succeeded. The one outcome where they came home. It was disorientingly anticlimactic. When the jutsu took effect there were no theatrics, no smoke or flashes of light. There was no transitory stage, no acid trip hallucinations, no swirling tunnel of clocks and hourglasses. Like Horatian, it was simply instantaneous. One moment, they were tweens with small, if well-conditioned, bodies and childish proportions. The boys had nothing especially significant between their legs, no exceptional tone or definition to their muscles. The girls had busts of no impressive size. Well, Hinata was hardly flat, but the difference between her 13-year-old self and her 30-odd-year-old self was still bigger than Sakura-san. Their hips were, the hips of preteens. Physically, the four of them were little more than kids. At least until they suddenly weren't. The transition was so abrupt that Naruto nearly fell flat on his face. His eyes went wide as he listed backwards in a body bigger and taller than the one to which he had grown accustomed. His conscious mind reeled at the sudden changes in proprioception and his center of gravity. An elite shinobi's reflexes let him catch himself and correct his balance before he could actually fall, naturally, but it was still a terribly close call. Hinata, abandoning her usual demure subtlety, threw her arms around her husband and kissed him deeply the moment she realized they were back. Baby! She reveled in the feeling of his hard, firm, manxome body beside hers and snatched an eager feel off of his backside. Damn, she had almost forgotten how good this felt. Something pressed against her leg, and Hinata's heart leaped. She could have wept for joy. At the same time as this, Sakura was greeting a pair of sorely missed old friends. She squeezed them tearfully, holding them tight to her sternum. I missed you so much. And oh man, I am so happy to see you too. And have you gotten bigger, or is it just me? And other such sentiments spilled from her mouth as she stroked and fondled the duo. She sniffled and even sobbed a little, so happy for this reunion. Most of the room's occupants averted their eyes, politely ignoring Mrs. Uchiha as she welcomed her boobs home. Sasuke gave his wife a smile and a squeeze on the shoulder, seeing her tearfully happy expression as she looked from her chest to their daughter, to their friends and comrades. He then turned and walked up to Sarada, who stood stock still and stared at him. She was visibly tense, clearly glad but also anxious to see her father, her true, unmistakable father, restored back to the person he should be. Riley, Sasuke poked the bespectacled young woman on the forehead. You know, I should really ground you for this, he intoned. Sarada smiled apologetically and let out a nervous laugh. Her cheeks were pink, and her eyes flickered over her parents' forms. She fidgeted, toeing the floor and fiddling with her fingers. So you guys know, huh? She said. That it was. We figured it out a while ago, yes, Sasuke replied nonchalantly. You two are usually at the center of messes like this. Sarada blushed and looked over at Boruto, who seemed very uncomfortable as his parents kissed before a roomful of spectators. She then met her father's eyes and squinted her lips in a sign of something not unlike contrition. You really should ground me, huh? She murmured, not so much a question or a statement, but rather simply a series of words which flowed out of her mouth with no real meaning or intent behind them. Sasuke said. I should, but I don't think I will. Smiling softly, he pulled his daughter into a one-armed hug and squeezed. Sarada squeaked and blushed, abashed but grateful, and returned the gesture with only a little hesitation. Sakura came over and joined in a moment later, beaming happily and throwing her arms around her favorite man and favorite girl in the whole wide world. So, what have we missed? She cheerfully inquired, giving her precious darling baby a grin. Less than you'd expect, Sarada said, shrugging. Honestly, I think the only thing of note might be the fact that we're all several months older. And I suppose that could be rather depressing if you really thought about it, but I'd rather not dwell on the subject. Sasuke and Sakura shrugged and waved this off. Meanwhile, Naruto and Hinata had finally managed to pull themselves away from each other long enough to actually greet their son. Where's my sweet little sunflower? Was the first thing Naruto said, looking around the room curiously. Boruto twitched. She's at school, Dad, he said. Naruto pouted at this. It's nice to see you again, dear, Hinata said in turn, giving Bolt a motherly hug. He blushed, but endured it, and was secretly glad for the embrace. Yeah. Sorry about this whole mess, Boruto said apologetically. There's really no excuse, but we wanted to know what you guys were like when you were younger, and well. I can understand that, Naruto said, giving him a pat on the shoulder. And don't worry. Apart from the whole no sex thing, it was honestly a nice little vacation. Am I still grounded then? Boruto tentatively wondered. Nah, Naruto said, grinning toothily. I think your mother can take care of your punishment this time. Boruto rapidly paled. I think I'd rather be grounded, please. Hinata smiled. It was all teeth. Too bad. Getting back into the flow of things was easier than might be expected, after such a lengthy absence. Time could change much, but humans were creatures of habit and routine, and bureaucracy was an immutable, plodding juggernaut. Sakura returned to her duties in the hospital, both as a doctor and administrator. Hinata reclaimed her role as sole matron and caregiver of the Uzumaki household. Sasuke took on a slew of missions, completing them with a truly effortless aplomb. Naruto sat once more in the seat of Hokage, commander-in-chief of Konohagakure. Despite everything which had happened as a result of that time travel fiasco, there was no force in the world so formidable as the sheer mundanity of a working adult's routine. Gainful employment was a thing which fed upon itself like an Ouroboros of pure boredom, bull-headed lemmings clinging to any rock they could find in the waters of an uncertain economy. People would do whatever they could to ensure the continuation of normalcy. There were speed bumps along the way, of course, small changes here or there which tripped the quartet up in little ways. Naruto had to learn a handful of updated information security measures, forced by Shikamaru to memorize a truly nightmarish assortment of mind-bogglingly complex new passwords and encryptions. Sakura needed to study up on a few changes in administrative procedure in the hospital, as well as a handful of experimental drugs and medical techniques developed in the interim. Hinata and Sasuke had fewer troubles in that regard. While Naruto and Sakura were entwined with the black, icy heart of Konoha's bureaucracy, the two wielders had been smart enough to avoid going that route with their careers. Sasuke was a field operative, while Hinata was a stay-at-home mom. Procedural minutiae and legal mumbo-jumbo were not nearly so important to them, and for this they were greatly envied by their respective spouses. But the more things changed, the more they stayed the same. No matter what happened, status quo was an immortal god enthroned on a hill of skulls, drinking the blood of virgins from a chalice of razor-faceted obsidian. Many brave fools had tried to slay it, but it was not something you could feel. Only time could change the norm, and not nearly so much time had passed. Naruto, Hinata, Sakura, and Sasuke resumed their duties with only a little difficulty in the grand scheme of things. They caught up with friends and family, making excuses with some and telling the truth to others. Ultimately, though, their experiences in the past made for little more than a novel tale to share with close acquaintances. All in all, the time travel fiasco would eventually become just a moderately classified footnote in their history. Himawari was spoiled a bit by her parents in compensation for their absence, and she would grow up a little scary as a result, but some would assert that she'd already been going that way from the start. She was still a sweet little angel when it suited her, either way. So, not much really changed for them. The world they had worked to shape was not so flimsy as to be unmade by such a brief absence on their ends. Their younger selves, on the other hand? Kakashi and Anko got married 2 years after the conclusion of the time travel fiasco. They filed for divorce 6 months later, and then they got back together again a year after that. Things were really awkward for a while there, what with the Beto and the whole shared field of view. Iruka and Shizen got married 3.5 years post-event, a week before Kakashi and Anko's second marriage. Shizen continued working as a medic, and Iruka kept right on teaching. They have 3 children, 2 of them are named after marine mammals. Itachi was sworn in as Lord 5th Hokage after the end of the Kite Wars. First Lady Karen Bonner redesigned the uniform to show off his chest, to the almost unanimous delight of Konoha's androsexual population. Itachi was only mildly perturbed by all the attention. Ino wrote a best-selling series of sapphic graphic novels illustrated by her boyfriend, Sai. Critics loved it, despite the ecchi elements and unremarkable plot. Sakura, for her part, wasn't sure whether to be happy or unnerved that the main love interest so strongly resembled her. Hayashi Hyuga did nothing of note, aside from avoiding anything that might upset his daughter. Shino became head instructor for ANBU's training division for all of 3 days. Then he was transferred to the academy after complaints that his methods were instilling severe entomophobia among the recruits. He maintains a strong, long-distance relationship with Fu. Kiba became a world-renowned dog breeder. Tamaki, his girlfriend, wrote a play about his life. It was heavily fictionalized and only barely resembled reality. Akamaru retired to a life as a stud, mating with all of Inuzuka's fittest bitches. Niji finally caught a break when he married Tenten, who opened a bookstore after her weapon shop failed to attract business. They have no kids, but not for lack of trying, or so Tenten will say with a wink and a grin, if pressed on the matter. Orochimaru discovered a cure for cancer. Unfortunately, it only worked on sharks and furthermore caused them to mutate into flying, amphibious hellbeasts as a side effect. He was subsequently barred from practicing medicine. Kabuto became de facto leader of Otogekyure and transformed it into an international powerhouse. His administration was dogged by scandals, however, and ultimately he was forced to resign amidst allegations of jaywalking, illegal experimentation, and possessing weird fetish porn. Kisame took Orochimaru's flying cancer sharks, media's name for them, not his, and trained them to become a first-rate circus act. Also a fearless death army, but mostly the circus thing. Karui married Chuji Akimichi. She was quoted after the reception as saying, "Chubby's forever." Her husband, in response, cheered, "Patanko forever." They then started making out and ripping each other's clothes off. Mei and Haku had 6 children, with 3 Genkai each. Their academy peers all called hacks, while historians laughed themselves into hysterics at the irony. Everyone agrees that Haku still looks better in dresses than his wife does. Nagato denounced prior claims of godhood, declaring himself a Kurishiten convert. Nobody knew what that was. But in the absence of Lord Pain, the ninja of AIM formed a sex cult around Konan. She was just barely more flattered than creeped out. After Kabuto abdicated his post, Tayuya assassinated the next-in-line Kimimaro and took over Oto in a bloody coup. She reigned long as a military dictator with Private Secretary Kin at her side, partly because she sensibly avoided conflict with the other hidden villages, Konoha, in particular. Hiruzen enjoyed a peaceful retirement after appointing Itachi Uchiha as his successor. He lived long enough to see the birth of his first great-grandchild. Danzo resumed their rivalry through games of and go. Asuma died a natural death of lung cancer at the age of 63. Kurenai survived him by another 11 years, before succumbing to kidney failure and cirrhosis of the liver from a life of hard drinking. Guy lived to be 100. He kept on shouting about the spirit of youth the entire time. Lee and Karen got married 6 years after their first meeting, and they named their first son Metal. He, in turn, eventually named his own son Blues. Zabuza commissioned the carpenters of Wave to renovate much of Kirigakure's infrastructure. Tazuna and Inari charged through the nose for every last board and nail. Yudakata married his student, Hataru, the day after she completed her training. He returned to Kiri, too, under the stipulation that the village provide them with a 5-star honeymoon suite. Killer Bee and Yujito opened a school to teach how to cooperate with Ebiju. And in between classes, they did a lot of cooperating with each other, too. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. Han developed a working steam engine to power Iwa's electrical generators. He then blew all his patent royalties at the racetrack. Rashi moved to a distant tropical island in order to perfect his martial arts after a fateful encounter with Mike Guy. The last anyone heard of him, he had taken to calling himself the Turtle Hermit. Gaara became a porn star, and his performances earned him a massive following throughout the Ninja Confederacy. Kankuro took care of production and various technical details, while Fandrills Matsuri and Yukata became frequent co-stars of Gaara's. Temari, mildly curious about her brother's career path, posed in a series of tasteful nudes for a highbrow gravure publication. She regretted it very much 20 years down the line when she caught her son and his friends with a copy of that very issue. It was an immensely awkward confrontation for all involved. Shikamaru enjoyed an average, mediocre life at least until he married Temari. Akatsuchi became Tsuchikage. His cousin, Kuratsuchi, became Kankuro's co-producer. She eventually starred alongside Kankuro in a porn of decidedly more private nature. It complicated a lot of things for them when said video got leaked onto a fledgling internet. Mabui became 5th Raikage the day she figured out how to weaponize her light-speed transportation jutsu. Nobody fucked with her after that, except for Darui. But that was more a bedroom kind of fucking, and it was very much mutual, besides. Jiraiya continued writing Ika Ika until the day he died except for a brief period during which he and Tsunade enjoyed a late-life fling. Nobody remembered Baki. Sasuke Uchiha followed in his brother's footsteps and joined ANBU, operating for a while as a squad captain. He racked up a staggering number of mission completions, and played a pivotal role in the Kite Wars. When that was over, he retired from ANBU and rebuilt Konoha's military police. Sakura Haruno joined Konoha's medical corps, studying under some of the world's best and brightest minds. With the notes left for her by her future self, she revolutionized the field of medicine and earned a place in the history books among the greatest doctors to ever live. Hinata Hyuga, after some well-deserved lessons in confidence and self-esteem, became head of her clan and abolished many of its most backwards and oppressive traditions. She also revolutionized the approach toward training children, emphasizing positive reinforcement and flexible routines. Naruto Uzumaki was a key player in multiple conflicts, struggling through many obstacles and pushing himself to live up to the reputation of his future self. It was hard going, and would have broken most people, but if anyone could do it, he could. It wasn't always easy, and they faced myriad hardships along the way, but Naruto, Sakura, Sasuke, and Hinata grew with every challenge. They ultimately lived up to, and even surpassed their future selves. Because that was just how they rolled. Obito tried to take over the world in a series of conflicts known as the Kite Wars. He was ultimately defeated with a cooking pot and a wooden spoon. Thanks for watching, Shinobi Squad. If you enjoyed this what if, hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss the next twist. Drop your theories in the comments, I'm always reading. Want more Naruto heat? Check out the other videos on the channel. Stay sharp, stay awesome, and remember even shadow clones need love.